Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's relaxing session. Before we get started, I'd love to know what's the most interesting or relatable Reddit story you've ever read. Drop it in the comments and maybe it'll keep someone company tonight. Now get comfortable and let's ease into some calm stories together. My ex's daughter keeps calling me dad, and I don't know how to make it stop without breaking her heart. I never thought I would be the kind of person posting something like this, but I am genuinely torn up and losing sleep over it. I was with my ex for almost 7 years. When we met, she already had a daughter who was 4 at the time. Her biological father was out of the picture completely. No calls, no cards, no child support, nothing. When I came into their lives, I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I was just dating a woman I liked and trying to be respectful of the fact that she was a mom first. Over time, things changed in ways I didn't fully notice until much later. I started helping with homework. I learned how to do her hair in the mornings when my ex had early shifts. I went to parent-teacher conferences because sometimes my ex couldn't get time off work. I taught her how to ride a bike and sat through endless dance recitals. Somewhere along the line, she started calling me dad. The first time it happened, it caught me off guard. I remember looking at my ex, unsure what to do, and she smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't correct it. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I had basically been acting like a dad anyway. I loved that kid. Still do. She wasn't just my girlfriend's daughter anymore. She was family. For years, that's how it felt. We lived together, shared bills, planned holidays, talked about marriage. I honestly believed this was my forever. Then, everything fell apart. My ex and I started fighting, constantly. It wasn't about the kid at first. It was money, stress, resentment that built up quietly. She accused me of not doing enough. I felt like I was carrying more than my share. Arguments turned ugly. Trust broke down. Eventually, we agreed to split up. It wasn't dramatic in the beginning. We told ourselves we would be civil, especially for her daughter's sake. I moved out. That was the first real crack. I went from being there every day to suddenly being a visitor. At first, I still saw her daughter regularly. I'd pick her up on weekends, take her to the park, grab ice cream, watch movies. She still called me dad, loudly and proudly in public. People assumed she was my biological kid. I never corrected them. But as months passed, things shifted again. My ex started dating someone new, a guy she met at work. I could feel the distance growing. Visits became less frequent. Texts went unanswered longer. Plans got canceled last minute. I tried not to take it personally, but it hurt more than I expected. The real problem started when my ex told me she wanted to redefine boundaries. That was her exact phrase. She said it wasn't healthy for her daughter to keep calling me dad when I wasn't actually her father and when I was no longer part of their household. She said it was confusing and unfair to everyone involved, including her new boyfriend. Logically, I understood her point. Emotionally, it felt like being punched in the chest. The next time I saw her daughter, she ran up to me yelling dad like always. Something inside me broke. I realized this couldn't keep going the way it was. I wasn't her legal guardian. I had no rights. I had no say. If my ex decided tomorrow that I was done, that would be it. No visits, no calls, nothing. And here was this child bonding to me as her father, while I had zero control over whether I could even stay in her life. I started to feel like I was setting her up for heartbreak later if I didn't address it now. I talked to my ex again and told her I agreed that we needed to change how her daughter referred to me. I suggested maybe using my first name or a nickname. She agreed in theory, but said she wanted me to be the one to explain it to her daughter since I was the one she was attached to. That conversation terrified me. I tried to approach it gently. I told her daughter that I loved her very much and that I always would, but that I wasn't her dad in the same way other kids have dads. I told her she didn't do anything wrong and that it wasn't her fault. I suggested she call me by my name instead. She looked at me like I had just told her the world wasn't real. She started crying. Not a tantrum, not dramatic, just quiet sobbing that felt worse somehow. She asked me if I was leaving her. She asked if I didn't love her anymore. I reassured her as best I could, but I could tell the damage was done. From that day on, something shifted between us. Now, every interaction feels heavy. Sometimes she slips and calls me dad, then freezes and looks at me like she's waiting to be corrected. Other times, she avoids using any name at all. My ex says this is for the best and that kids are resilient. She says I'm overthinking it and that I need to accept my role is changing. But I feel like a villain. I feel like I abandoned a child who trusted me completely. At the same time, I feel like I was put in an impossible position. I didn't choose to stop being part of her life. The relationship ended. The structure disappeared. I'm trying to do what's healthiest long term, but it feels cruel in the moment. To make things worse, my ex's new boyfriend has started pushing for me to be completely out of the picture. He says it's inappropriate for me to still be involved and that it's confusing for the child. My ex hasn't fully agreed with him, but she hasn't shut it down either. Every time I hear about it, my anxiety spikes. I've even looked into whether I have any legal standing at all. From what I can tell, I don't. I never adopted her. There's no custody agreement. If my ex decides tomorrow that I'm done, that's it. Knowing that makes the whole dad thing feel even more fragile and dangerous emotionally. Some friends tell me I should have corrected it years ago. Others say I stepped up when no one else did, and I shouldn't feel guilty. A few have bluntly said that I need to protect myself and let go before this destroys me. None of those options feel right. I miss the normalcy we used to have. I miss being able to just exist in her life without analyzing every word and boundary. I miss not feeling like I'm constantly one bad conversation away from losing her completely. I don't hate my ex. I don't even think she's wrong for wanting clarity and stability for her daughter. I just hate that the responsibility of breaking that bond seems to have landed on me. I hate that I'm the one who had to look a child in the eyes and explain why something that felt real to her suddenly wasn't allowed anymore. So here I am, stuck between wanting to protect a child from future pain and feeling like I've already caused her pain now. I don't know if there was a way to handle this that wouldn't hurt. I don't know if I should have fought harder to stay in her life or step back sooner. I just know that being called dad was never about ego for me. It was about love and commitment, and now it feels like a mistake I can't undo. I don't know what the right answer is anymore. I just know that every time I hear that word, whether she says it or stops herself from saying it, my chest tightens, and I wonder if doing the responsible thing still makes me the bad guy in her story. Update: my ex's daughter keeps calling me dad, and I don't know how to make it stop without breaking her heart. I didn't expect things to escalate as fast as they did after I first shared what was going on. I honestly thought the update would be something small, like we all adjusted slowly and it got easier. That is not what happened. A few days after that conversation with her daughter, my ex asked to meet up without the kid present. I already had a bad feeling. We sat in her car outside a coffee shop and she barely looked at me while she talked. She said her daughter had been having trouble sleeping, nightmares, crying before school, asking over and over if I was going to disappear. Hearing that made me feel sick because that was the exact thing I was trying to avoid. I told my ex that maybe we rushed it and that we could slow things down, maybe let her daughter transition naturally instead of forcing a change all at once. That is when my ex finally admitted that her new boyfriend was not just uncomfortable, but actively angry about my continued involvement. Apparently, he had overheard her daughter calling me dad on the phone and lost it. He said it made him feel like he was competing with a ghost and that it wasn't fair to him or healthy for the child. That conversation turned into an argument between me and my ex. She accused me of making things harder by staying emotionally involved while not being fully committed. I reminded her that I didn't choose to stop being committed. The relationship ended, not my feelings for her child. She said intentions didn't matter as much as reality, and the reality was that I was no longer family in a legal or practical sense. Then, she said something that has been replaying in my head nonstop. She said maybe letting her daughter call me dad in the first place was a mistake, and that we both should have known better. That hurt more than I can explain. It felt like she was rewriting history, like all those years of bedtime stories and school projects and scraped knees were suddenly being downgraded to a poor judgment call. I told her I never asked her daughter to call me dad and that I only allowed it because she encouraged it. She didn't deny that, but said it didn't change where we were now. A week later, she told me she wanted to take a break from visits for a while so her daughter could adjust. She framed it as temporary, but couldn't give me a timeline. When I asked how long, she said she didn't know and that it depended on how her daughter handled things and how stable her new relationship became. That was the moment it really hit me how little control I had. The last time I saw her daughter was rough. She knew something was different even if she didn't understand all of it. She clung to me when I dropped her off and asked if I was mad at her. I told her no over and over. She asked if she could still love me. I told her of course she could. She didn't call me dad that time. She just hugged me and whispered my name like she was testing it out to see if it felt wrong. After that, the silence started. Days went by without messages. When I reached out, responses were short and delayed. Eventually, my ex told me that her daughter was doing better and that continuing contact right now might set her back. She said she would let me know when things stabilized. I haven't heard anything since. I went from being a daily presence in a child's life to nothing. No calls, no updates, no pictures. It feels like grieving someone who is still alive. I wake up sometimes thinking about whether she remembers me the way I remember her, or if I'm already fading into something confusing and distant in her mind. I spoke to a lawyer just to understand where I stood. It confirmed what I already knew. I have no rights here. No matter how much love or effort I put in, it doesn't count legally. That realization was devastating, but also clarifying. I finally understood that as long as I stayed halfway attached, I was only prolonging the pain for myself and potentially for her. I sent my ex one last message. I told her that I loved her daughter and always would, but that I respected her decision to create space. I asked her to please tell her daughter that I didn't leave because of anything she did, and that she mattered to me. My ex replied with a simple thank you and said she would. I don't know if she actually did. Now I'm trying to rebuild my life without a role that defined me for years. I catch myself buying things I no longer need, thinking about movies we used to watch together, recipes she liked. Every habit has to be unlearned. Friends keep telling me time will help, but right now, time just feels empty. I still believe setting boundaries was the responsible thing. I still believe letting a child believe I could be her dad forever, when I had no power to guarantee that would have been worse in the long run. But knowing something intellectually doesn't make it hurt less emotionally. If there is one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that stepping into a parental role without legal protection is a risk people don't talk about enough. Love alone doesn't shield anyone from loss. I don't regret loving her. I regret that loving her came with an expiration date I didn't know about until it was already over. I don't know if she will remember me as the man who left or the man who showed up when no one else did. I don't know which version will stick. All I know is that somewhere out there is a kid who once called me dad, and somewhere inside me is a part that will always answer to that name even if I never hear it again. Final update. My ex's daughter keeps calling me dad, and I don't know how to make it stop without breaking her heart. I waited a long time before writing this because I needed to be sure it really was the end of this chapter and not just another pause. It has been months now, and enough has happened that I finally feel like I can put the full picture into words. After I sent that last message to my ex, there was silence for a long time. Weeks went by where I heard absolutely nothing. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes and started checking it only a few times a day. That alone felt like progress, even though it came with a lot of guilt. Part of me felt like if I stopped watching for her name to pop up, I was giving up on a kid who didn't deserve that. Then one evening, out of nowhere, my ex called me. Hearing her voice again was jarring. She didn't waste time on small talk. She told me her relationship with her boyfriend had fallen apart. Apparently, the tension around me and her daughter was only one of many issues, but it had been a big one. He wanted a clean slate and saw me as baggage from her past. She chose not to continue with him. I didn't feel relief like I thought I might. Mostly I felt tired. She told me her daughter had been asking about me again. Not constantly, not obsessively, but in small, quiet ways. Asking if I was okay. Asking if I still lived in the same place. Asking if I remembered the nickname she used to call me when she was little. My ex said she realized that cutting me off completely hadn't brought the peace she expected. It just created a different kind of sadness. She asked if I would be willing to be back in her daughter's life in a limited way, with clearer boundaries this time. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I didn't want to rush back into the same dynamic and repeat the same mistakes. I also didn't want to disappear again after re-entering her world. I told my ex I would only agree if we were honest with her daughter and consistent going forward. No more pulling me in and out depending on who my ex was dating. No more pretending I could be something I legally wasn't. We agreed to try. The first time I saw her daughter again was emotional in a way I can't fully describe. She was taller. Her voice sounded older. She hesitated when she saw me, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be happy. Then she smiled and ran over and hugged me so hard, it knocked the breath out of me. She didn't call me Dad. She said my name. It hurt and healed at the same time. We talked. Not in a big dramatic way, but honestly. I told her I wasn't going anywhere, but that I wasn't her dad either. I told her that didn't mean what we had wasn't real. It just meant it was different. She asked if she did something wrong. I told her no. She asked if she could still love me. I told her yes, and that I loved her too. She nodded like she was filing the information away, the way kids do when they're trying to understand something too big for them. Over time, things settled into something new. I see her, occasionally. We get lunch. We go to the park. Sometimes we just sit and talk. She doesn't introduce me as her dad anymore. I'm her friend, someone she trusts. It's not the role I once had, but it's real and it's stable. My ex and I are not getting back together. We're civil, careful, and focused on what's best for her daughter. We've had hard conversations about the past and about boundaries. I made it clear that if things ever change again, I need honesty up front. I won't go through another sudden disappearance. As for me, I've learned some painful but important lessons. Love doesn't always come with protection. Good intentions don't replace legal realities. And sometimes doing the right thing still hurts everyone involved, just in different ways. I no longer feel like a villain, but I also don't feel like a hero. I'm just someone who loved a child and had to learn how to love her in a way that wouldn't keep breaking her heart or mine. When she looks at me now, there's no confusion in her eyes, just warmth. That tells me we finally found a balance. She hasn't called me dad again. I don't expect her to. But sometimes, when she hugs me goodbye, she squeezes a little tighter, like she's making sure I'm real and staying where I am. And I squeeze back, knowing that this version of our connection, imperfect as it is something I can finally hold on to without fear of it being ripped away overnight. This is where it ends. Not with everything fixed or neatly tied up, but with honesty, boundaries, and a quieter kind of love that doesn't need a title to exist. Stories number 2. My ex-husband wanted an open marriage, and it backfired in his face. I never thought I would be the kind of person who ended up writing something like this, but here I am, typing it out because I need to get it off my chest and maybe get some perspective from people who are not emotionally tangled up in my life. I am writing this in first person because it is my story and because I lived every awkward conversation and every sleepless night that came with it. I was married to my ex-husband for a little over 8 years. When we met, I was in my mid-20s and he was a few years older than me. We met through mutual friends at a backyard barbecue and hit it off in a very normal, boring way. He was charming in a low-key way and seemed dependable. He had a steady job and talked about wanting a family someday. At that time, that was exactly what I wanted. We dated for a couple of years before getting married, and the early part of our marriage was honestly good. Not movie perfect, but comfortable and warm. We had routines: Sunday grocery trips, late night takeout on Fridays, arguments about laundry and dishes, but nothing explosive. Things started to change around year 5. He became restless in a way I could not put my finger on at first. He started talking about feeling stuck and about how society puts unrealistic expectations on marriage. At first, I thought it was just a phase or stress from work. I tried to be supportive. I suggested therapy. I suggested trips together. I tried to initiate deeper conversations. Sometimes he would engage, and other times he would shut down. Then one night after dinner, he dropped the bomb. We were sitting on the couch, and he said he had been thinking a lot about non-traditional relationships. He said he loved me, but felt like monogamy was limiting his personal growth. Those were his exact words, and I remember them because they made my stomach drop. He said he wanted to talk about opening our marriage. I was shocked. I had never once expressed interest in anything like that. I asked him if he was unhappy with me. He said no. I asked if he had already met someone. He said no, but also said he had been talking to people online and reading forums. That did not make me feel better. I told him I needed time to think, and he agreed, but kept bringing it up every few days after that. He framed it as something that would make us stronger. He said honesty and freedom would bring us closer. He said it would be equal and respectful. I said no at first, firmly. I told him I did not sign up for an open marriage and that the idea made me anxious and insecure. He responded by saying my reaction proved how conditioned I was by traditional norms. That hurt. Over time, the conversations wore me down. He would say he felt suffocated. He would say he was afraid he would resent me if he never explored this side of himself. He never said he would leave if I refused, but it was implied in the way he talked about his unhappiness. Eventually, I agreed to try it with strict boundaries. I want to be very clear here. I did not agree because I wanted it. I agreed because I was scared of losing my marriage, and because I believed him when he said it would be fair and that my feelings would matter. We set rules. Full transparency. No bringing anyone into our home, no mutual friends, safe practices, and most importantly, that either of us could stop everything if it became too much. The moment we agreed, something shifted in him. He became energized. He downloaded apps immediately. He spent hours on his phone. He talked about dates in a casual, almost bragging way. Meanwhile, I felt like I was watching my marriage slowly dissolve in front of me. I tried to participate because I thought that was what being fair meant. I went on a couple of dates but felt awkward and guilty the entire time. I did not enjoy it. I came home one night and cried in the shower so he would not hear me. He, on the other hand, was thriving, or at least pretending to. He would come home late with a smile on his face. He would tell me stories I did not want to hear, even though I asked him to keep details minimal. When I expressed discomfort, he accused me of being controlling and not truly committed to the process. I started to feel like the bad guy in my own marriage. The turning point came when I met someone through work. I was not looking for anything serious. It started as friendly conversation during lunch breaks. He was kind and listened to me without judgment. He knew I was married and understood the situation. Over time, the connection grew. I told my husband about it because honesty was one of the rules. He seemed unfazed at first and even encouraged me to explore it. What he did not expect was that I would actually feel something real. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen and valued. I felt calm instead of anxious. I was not sneaking around. I was following the rules my husband insisted on. When my husband realized that my connection was emotional and not just casual, he panicked. Suddenly, he wanted to renegotiate boundaries. He started asking where I was all the time. He became suspicious and jealous. One night, he accused me of falling in love. I did not deny it because I was done lying. I told him that, yes, I had developed feelings and that it made me realize how unhappy I had been. He lost it. He said that was not what he meant by open marriage. He said it was supposed to be physical and fun, not emotional. I reminded him that he never said that, and that he had multiple emotional connections himself. He said it was different. When I asked how he could not explain it without getting angry. From that point on, everything unraveled quickly. He wanted to close the marriage again. I told him I needed time because I was confused and hurt. He accused me of ruining everything. He said the open marriage was my idea, which was a complete lie. He told friends a version of the story that made him look like the victim. I started getting messages asking why I had pushed him into something he did not want. We tried couples therapy, but it felt pointless. He was more focused on winning than understanding. He wanted me to cut off my connection immediately while still refusing to take responsibility for how we got there. I realized that even if we closed the marriage, the trust was gone. I did not recognize the man I was married to anymore. Or maybe I finally did. I asked for a separation. He was shocked, even though in hindsight it should not have been. He begged at first. Then he got angry. He accused me of abandoning him. He said I owed it to him to fix what I broke. I moved out and stayed with a friend for a while. The separation gave me clarity. Without the constant pressure, I realized how manipulated I had felt, how often my needs had been dismissed. The divorce process was messy emotionally, but straightforward legally. We did not have kids, which made things simpler. He dragged his feet on paperwork and tried to use mediation sessions to rehash our relationship issues. At one point, he suggested we pause the divorce and try again monogamously. I said no. I was done. Here is where it really backfired for him. The people he had been seeing during our open marriage did not stick around once I was gone. The freedom he wanted did not feel so exciting when there was no stable partner at home. He reached out multiple times after the divorce was finalized. Sometimes he said he missed me. Other times he said he regretted everything. Once he even admitted that he thought I would never actually leave. I blocked him eventually because I needed peace. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, he is still talking about open relationships, but also complaining about how hard it is to find someone who wants to commit. The irony is not lost on me. As for me, I am doing better. I took time to be alone and figure out who I am outside of that marriage. I learned that agreeing to something that goes against your core values will eat away at you slowly. I learned that compromise should not mean self-erasure. I am not here to say that open marriages never work. I am sure they do for some people. But forcing one onto a partner who is clearly uncomfortable is not ethical or loving. I am sharing this because I wish I had trusted my initial no. I wish I had believed that my discomfort was reason enough. If someone you love tells you that you are holding them back by wanting basic commitment that says more about them than it does about you. I am not perfect, and I made mistakes, but agreeing to an open marriage under pressure was one of the biggest lessons of my life. Right now, I am focused on rebuilding and on learning to listen to myself again. If you are reading this and feeling that knot in your stomach because your partner wants something you know you cannot handle, please listen to that feeling. It is trying to protect you. Update: my ex-husband wanted an open marriage and it backfired in his face. I did not expect to be back here writing an update, but a lot has happened since I first shared my story, and I feel like I need to put it somewhere before it eats at me. After the divorce was finalized, I thought the chapter was closed. I truly believed that once the paperwork was signed and the last box was unpacked in my new place, that my ex-husband would fade into the background of my life. That did not happen. For a few months, things were quiet. I focused on work and rebuilding routines that felt like mine. I redecorated my apartment in a way he would have hated. I slept better than I had in years. I stayed single on purpose because I needed to understand myself again without bending to someone else's expectations. The person I had developed feelings for during the open marriage, and I decided not to pursue anything serious. It was mutual and respectful and honestly healing in its own way. Then the messages started again. At first they were polite. He asked how I was doing and said he hoped I was well. I did not respond. Then they became longer and more emotional. He said he was in therapy and finally understood how much pressure he had put on me. He said he was lonely and that dating had been harder than he expected. He said the open marriage had ruined his ability to trust and be trusted. That part almost made me laugh, but mostly it made me sad. I blocked his number after that, but apparently that only slowed him down. He emailed me. He messaged me on social media. He even tried reaching out through a mutual friend, who shut it down immediately. The tone shifted from regret to resentment. He started saying things like he lost everything because of one mistake. He said I gave up too easily. He said if I had just been patient, we could have fixed it. The most unsettling part was when he showed up at my apartment unannounced. He said he just wanted to talk. I told him through the door that he needed to leave. He stood there for a few minutes before finally going away. That night, I barely slept. I realized then that I needed firmer boundaries than blocking messages. I spoke to a lawyer just to understand my options. I did not want to escalate things, but I wanted to know where I stood if his behavior continued. I documented everything. The emails, the messages, the date he showed up. Knowing I had a plan gave me some peace of mind. Around the same time, I started hearing things through the grapevine. Apparently, he had been telling people a very different version of events. In his story, I was the one who pushed for the open marriage. I was the one who fell in love with someone else and abandoned him. Some people believed him. Others did not. A few reached out to me directly and asked what really happened. I told the truth calmly, without attacking him. I learned that I did not need to defend myself to everyone. Here's the part that really drives home how much this backfired for him. He lost more than just our marriage. The friends who initially supported his lifestyle change started distancing themselves. Some were uncomfortable with how he talked about women. Some got tired of hearing him complain about how unfair dating was. A couple of them admitted to me later that they had warned him that pushing me into an open marriage could end badly. He did not listen. He reached out one last time a few weeks ago through an email I almost did not open. He said he finally understood that what he wanted was validation, not freedom. He said seeing me move on and thrive forced him to confront parts of himself he had been avoiding. He asked if there was any chance we could meet for coffee and talk like adults. I thought about it longer than I expected to. Then I said no. Saying no felt powerful in a quiet way. It was not angry. It was not dramatic. It was simply honest. I told him I wished him well, but that reopening communication would not be healthy for me. I told him I needed to keep my distance. He did not reply after that, and I hope it stays that way. As for me, I am in a much better place than when I first wrote this. I am not rushing into anything, but I am open again in a way I was not before. I trust my instincts more. I speak up sooner. I no longer confuse love with endurance. Looking back, I see how the open marriage conversation was never really about mutual growth. It was about him wanting to have everything without risking anything and assuming I would always be there to catch him if it fell apart. If there is one thing I want people to take from this update, it is that you are allowed to change your mind and walk away even if you agreed to something once. Consent is not a lifetime contract. Love should not require you to silence your discomfort. I am grateful I chose myself, even though it was terrifying at the time. The peace I have now is something I would not trade for anything. Stories number 3. My coworker's birthday gift turned into a mess I never expected. I work at a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio, the kind of place where most people keep their heads down, do their jobs, and only talk about work or the weather. I'm 29, single, and pretty private at work because I've learned the hard way that oversharing in an office always comes back to bite you. I get along with people fine. I just don't mix my personal life with my job. About 2 months ago, a woman named Lauren transferred into our department from another branch. She's friendly in a loud way, always talking, always laughing, always asking questions. She sits 2 desks away from me. We say hi, we talk about work, and sometimes we complain about the coffee machine. That's it. We've never hung out, never texted, never talked about anything personal. I couldn't even tell you if she has siblings or what she does on weekends. One Monday morning, I got an email from a guy named Derek, who sits near the front of the office. The subject said, Lauren's birthday gift. The email said something like, "Hey everyone, Lauren's birthday is next Friday, and I thought it would be nice if we all chipped in for a group gift. I'm thinking a $150 gift card to a spa near her place. If everyone can send me $15 by Wednesday, that would be awesome." I stared at the screen and honestly felt confused. There are about 12 people in our department, so that math didn't even add up, but that wasn't the main point. I barely knew Lauren. I didn't dislike her, but she was basically a coworker I talked to about spreadsheets and deadlines. $15 isn't a huge amount, but it's not nothing either, especially when you're constantly being asked to chip in for baby showers, weddings, retirements, and random birthdays. It adds up fast. I replied to Derek privately and said, "Hey, I'm probably going to pass on this. I don't really know Lauren that well, no hard feelings, just trying to keep my budget under control." He wrote back with just, "Oh, okay, I thought that was the end of it." On Tuesday, Lauren came by my desk and said, "Hey, Derek said he's collecting money for my birthday gift. Isn't that sweet?" She was smiling, clearly excited. I just said, "Yeah, that's nice of him." She looked at me for a second and said, "Did you send him your part yet?" I felt awkward, but I didn't want to lie, so I said, "No, I'm actually not pitching in. I don't really do group gifts for people I don't know well." Her smile dropped a little. She said, "Oh, okay." Then she walked back to her desk. I could already feel that weird tension in the air, the kind that tells you this is not going to stay small. By Wednesday, people were acting differently around me. A woman named Michelle, who usually jokes with me at lunch, barely said a word. Another guy, Tyler, who always asks me for help with reports, didn't even look at me when he walked past my desk. I started to feel like I had done something wrong, even though logically I knew I hadn't. That afternoon, Derek came to my desk and said, "Hey man, some people are kind of upset that you didn't want to contribute." I said, "Why?" "It's optional, right?" He shrugged and said, "Yeah, but it just looks bad." "Like you don't care." I said, "I don't even know her. It's not personal." He nodded, but didn't really look convinced. On Friday, they gave Lauren the gift in the break room. Everyone clapped. She hugged Derek. She thanked everyone. Then she looked at me. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to make me uncomfortable. I felt like the only person in the room who didn't belong. After that, things slowly got worse. Lauren stopped saying hi to me in the mornings. She wouldn't include me in casual conversations. If I tried to join in, she would kind of go quiet or change the subject. I didn't care that much at first, but then other people started doing the same thing. It felt like I had been quietly labeled as the cheap, uncaring guy. One day in the lunchroom, I sat at a table where Michelle and Tyler were already sitting. They both got up and moved to another table without saying anything. That hit harder than I expected. I'm not in high school anymore. I didn't think grown adults would act like that. I started dreading going to work. I just wanted to do my job and go home, but now every day felt tense. I replayed the situation in my head 1,000 times, wondering if I should have just paid the $15 and avoided all of this. But another part of me was angry that people thought they were entitled to my money just because of office social rules. About a week later, my manager Greg called me into his office. He's in his 40s, pretty laid back most of the time. He said, "I just want to check in. I've noticed some tension in the department." I told him the whole story. I explained that I didn't know Lauren, that I didn't feel comfortable spending money on someone I barely interact with, and that now I felt like I was being iced out. Greg sighed and said, "Look, No one can force you to contribute to a gift. That's not a company policy. But you also have to understand how it looks socially, I said. So what am I supposed to do? Apologize for not spending my own money, he said. I'm not saying that. I just want everyone to get along. That was the most useless meeting I've ever had. Things kept getting worse. Lauren started making small comments that weren't directly about me, but were clearly meant to be heard. She would say things like, some people are just really selfish, or I guess not everyone believes in being part of a team. She would say it loud enough for people nearby to hear, including me. One day, I finally said, if you have something to say to me, just say it to me. She looked shocked and said, I wasn't talking about you. I said, it really feels like you are. She rolled her eyes and said, whatever. After that, she went straight to Greg. Later that day, Greg called me in again and said Lauren felt uncomfortable around me because I had confronted her. I said, all I did was ask her to be direct instead of passive-aggressive. Greg said, just try to avoid conflict. So now I was being told to stay quiet while people treated me badly. Then it got even more serious. One morning, HR sent me an email asking me to come in for a meeting. I had no idea what it was about. When I got there, a woman named Denise from HR was sitting with Greg. Denise said, there have been complaints that you are creating a hostile work environment. My heart started pounding. I asked, what does that even mean? She said, some employees feel uncomfortable because of your behavior. I asked for examples. She said that Lauren felt targeted and judged because I didn't contribute to her gift, and because I confronted her in the office. I said, not giving someone money is not harassment. And asking someone to talk to me directly instead of making comments behind my back is not hostile. Denise said, we're just gathering information right now. I walked out of that meeting shaking. I've never been in trouble at work before. I've never even had a warning. Now suddenly I was being painted as some kind of bully because I didn't buy a gift. That night, I called my older brother Kevin and told him everything. He's more blunt than I am. He said, that's ridiculous. They can't force you to spend money. If they try to discipline you for that, you should talk to a lawyer. That scared me even more. I didn't want to deal with lawyers. I just wanted to go to work and not be miserable. Over the next few days, I started keeping notes. Every comment Lauren made, every time someone excluded me, every meeting with Greg or HR. I felt paranoid, but I also felt like I had to protect myself. A week later, Denise called me in again. She said, we've talked to several people. It seems like the main issue is that your actions were seen as unsupportive of team culture. I said, team culture shouldn't be about forcing people to spend money. She said, no one is forcing you. But your choice had an impact. I said, so am I in trouble? She said, we're not taking disciplinary action right now, but we want you to be more mindful of how your behavior affects others. I left feeling angry and helpless. It felt like they were telling me I was wrong without actually saying it. I tried to smooth things over. One day I told Lauren, look, I'm sorry if my decision hurt your feelings. It wasn't personal. I just don't do group gifts like that. She crossed her arms and said, it felt personal. I said, it really wasn't. She said, well, it made me feel like you don't respect me. I didn't know what else to say. How do you convince someone of something when they've already decided what they believe? After that, things didn't really improve. People were still distant. I felt like I was walking on eggshells all the time. I stopped talking unless it was about work. I ate lunch in my car most days just to avoid the awkwardness. At home, I kept thinking about whether I should quit. But I like my job. The pay is decent. The work is fine. I shouldn't have to leave because of something this stupid. One night, I talked to my friend Marcus about it. He said, man, sometimes it's easier to just pay the stupid $15 than deal with months of drama. I said, yeah, but then what? Next time it's 20, then 30. Then I'm paying for every random thing just to keep people happy. He didn't really have an answer to that. A few days later, something else happened that really crossed the line. I was in the copy room when I heard Lauren and Michelle talking in the hallway. Lauren said, "He's just cheap. Probably doesn't even tip at restaurants." Michelle laughed and said, "Yeah, he just seems like that type." They didn't know I was there. I stepped out and said, "You know I can hear you." They both went quiet. Lauren said, "We're just joking." I said, "It doesn't feel like a joke." I went straight to Greg and told him what happened. He looked tired and said, "I'll talk to them." Nothing changed. That's when I seriously started thinking about my options. I looked up employment laws in my state. I learned that while companies can encourage team bonding, they cannot require employees to spend their own money. I also learned that creating a hostile environment through repeated behavior can be a real issue, but it usually has to be about protected categories, not just social drama. Still, I felt like I was being punished for something that shouldn't matter. One afternoon, Denise asked me to come in again. She said, "We're getting continued feedback that the team feels divided." I said, "I feel targeted." She said, "We haven't found evidence of harassment based on a protected class, so it doesn't meet that definition." I said, "So I just have to live with being treated badly?" She said, "We're encouraging everyone to be professional." I walked out feeling completely defeated. At this point, it had been over a month since the birthday gift. One small decision had turned into a huge problem. I started sending out resumes, just in case. I didn't want to leave, but I also didn't want to stay somewhere I felt unwanted. One day, Tyler finally talked to me again. He said, "You could have just paid. It would have been easier for everyone." I said, "Easier for everyone except me." He shrugged and said, "Sometimes you gotta do stuff you don't like to keep the peace." That sentence stuck with me. Maybe he was right. But maybe that kind of thinking is exactly why people feel entitled to each other's money and time. Now I'm stuck. I don't know if I should keep standing my ground, even if it means being uncomfortable every day. I don't know if I should just give in next time something like this comes up, even though it feels wrong to me. I don't know if I should quit a job I otherwise like because of office politics that started over $15. All I know is that I never thought saying no to a birthday gift for someone I barely know would turn into this kind of mess. It feels unfair. It feels petty. And it feels like no matter what I do now, someone is going to think I'm the bad guy. I just wanted to do my job and go home. Instead, I'm questioning my choices, my workplace, and whether being honest about my boundaries is worth the cost. Update. My coworker's birthday gift turned into a mess I never expected. A lot has happened since I last wrote, and I honestly didn't think things could get more complicated, but somehow they did. After I started sending out resumes, I actually got a few callbacks. That alone made me feel a little better, like I wasn't completely trapped. I didn't tell anyone at work about it. I kept my head down and did exactly what my job required, nothing more and nothing less. Lauren kept ignoring me unless it was absolutely necessary for work. When she did talk to me, her tone was cold and short. Michelle and Tyler still mostly avoided me. A few others acted neutral, like they didn't want to get involved. I started noticing that people would stop talking when I walked into a room. It sounds dramatic, but when it happens over and over, you feel it. One morning, I got another email from HR asking me to come in. My stomach dropped. When I got there, Denise was there again. But this time there was also someone named Raymond from corporate HR on a video call. Denise said, "We've had continued concerns about tension in the department." I said, "I've tried to be professional. I don't talk about this anymore. I just do my job." Raymond said, "We understand that. But we're also hearing that communication has broken down." I said, "It broke down because people decided to treat me differently over a birthday gift." Denise said, "We're not here to argue about the past. We're trying to move forward." Raymond suggested a mediated conversation between me and Lauren. I really didn't want to, but I also felt like refusing would make me look worse, so I agreed. The meeting happened 2 days later. It was me, Lauren, Denise, and Greg. Denise asked both of us to explain how we felt. Lauren went first. She said she felt disrespected, excluded, and embarrassed by me not contributing to her gift. She said when I confronted her about her comments, she felt intimidated. She said she felt like I didn't value her as a coworker. Then it was my turn. I said I never meant to disrespect her. I said I didn't contribute because I don't do group gifts for people I don't know well. I said that when she started making comments that felt aimed at me, I asked her to talk to me directly instead. I said I felt isolated and targeted after that. Denise asked Lauren if she could see how her comments might have come across as passive-aggressive. Lauren hesitated, then said, "Maybe, but I was just venting." I said venting out loud about me in the office. Lauren said, "I didn't say your name." I said, "You didn't have to." The room was quiet for a bit. Greg looked uncomfortable. Denise finally said, "It seems like there were hurt feelings on both sides, but no one intended serious harm." I wanted to say that intention doesn't erase impact, but I stayed quiet. They asked if we could agree to be professional and respectful going forward. Lauren said yes. I said yes. There was no apology from either side, just this forced agreement. After that meeting, things did change, but not in a good way or a bad way, just in a different way. Lauren stopped making comments, at least where I could hear them. She talked to me when she had to, in a flat, businesslike tone. The obvious hostility faded, but the warmth never came back. Some coworkers slowly started talking to me again. Tyler asked me for help with the report one day, like nothing had ever happened. Michelle said hi to me in the hallway. It felt fake, like everyone was just trying to avoid trouble rather than actually fixing anything. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman named Natalie from another department came over to my desk and said, "Hey, I just wanted to say I heard a little about what happened, and I don't think you were wrong." I was surprised. I asked, "Heard from who?" She said, "People talk. I just wanted you to know not everyone thinks you're some bad guy." That meant more to me than she probably realized. A week later, another group email went out. This time it was for a baby shower for someone in accounting named Jenna. Different department, but a lot of people were included. They were asking for $20 this time. I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me wanted to just pay it and avoid everything. Another part of me felt stubborn. But after everything that happened, I also felt tired. I didn't want another war over money. I decided to handle it differently. I replied to the organizer and said, "I'm not able to contribute money right now, but I hope it goes well." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just stated it. Nothing happened. No one confronted me. No one treated me differently. It made me realize how much of the original problem was about Lauren personally taking it as an insult, not about some universal office rule. A few days later, Lauren actually spoke to me in a normal tone for the first time in months. She asked me a question about a report, then said thanks, without any edge in her voice. I don't think we'll ever be friends, but at least it felt human again. Then I got an email that changed everything. One of the companies I had applied to offered me a position. The pay was slightly higher, the benefits were similar, and the commute was about the same. I sat at my desk staring at that offer for a long time. Part of me felt relieved, like I finally had an escape. Another part of me felt sad that something so small had pushed me to leave a job I used to like. I took a day to think about it. I talked to my brother Kevin again. He said, "If you can leave and start fresh somewhere without all that baggage, why wouldn't you?" I also talked to Marcus. He said, "Sometimes you don't leave because you're wrong. You leave because you're tired." That hit hard, because I was tired. Tired of watching what I said. Tired of feeling judged. Tired of replaying a stupid $15 decision in my head. I accepted the new job. I gave my 2 weeks notice to Greg. He looked surprised and said, "Is this because of what happened?" I said, "It's part of it." He said, "I wish we could have handled that better." I didn't know what to say to that. Word spread fast. Some people acted shocked. Some acted like they saw it coming. Lauren didn't say anything to me at first. Then, a few days before my last day, she came to my desk. She said, "I heard you're leaving." I said, "Yeah." She hesitated, then said, I guess things got out of hand. I said, yeah, they did. She said, I never meant for it to go that far. I believed her, but that didn't change what happened. On my last day, a few people wished me luck. Tyler shook my hand. Michelle said she hoped the new job was good. Natalie hugged me. Lauren just nodded at me. When I walked out of that building for the last time, I felt a mix of relief and anger and sadness. Relief that it was over. Anger that it ever got that bad. Sadness that something so small had such big consequences. Looking back, I still don't think I was wrong for saying no. I think the real problem was that people decided what my no meant without ever really listening to me. I learned that sometimes standing by your boundaries costs you comfort. And sometimes, even when you're right, you still lose something. I'm starting my new job next week. I'm nervous, but also hopeful. I plan to be friendly, professional, and clear about my limits. If they ever ask me to chip in for a gift, I'll handle it the same way I did before. But now I also know that sometimes, even the smallest choices can change everything. Stories number 4. My boyfriend's mom laughed at my job at dinner and I finally snapped. I never thought I would be the kind of person to write one of these posts, but here I am sitting on my couch at midnight, still shaking and replaying everything that happened tonight. I feel embarrassed, angry, and also weirdly guilty, and I honestly don't know if I crossed a line or if this was inevitable. I am 27 and I live in Ohio. I work as a freelance video editor and content manager, mostly for small businesses and nonprofits. It is not a flashy job, but it pays my bills, and I genuinely enjoy it. I didn't go the traditional route after college, and that has always made me a little defensive even when nobody is attacking me. My boyfriend is 30, and his name is Andrew. We have been together a little over 2 years, and until now, I thought things were solid. We don't live together yet, but we've talked about it seriously. Andrew comes from a very traditional family. His dad, Michael, is an engineer, and his mom, Linda, is a retired high school guidance counselor. They live in a nice suburb and have very clear ideas about what success looks like. Andrew works in it for a hospital network, and they are extremely proud of him. From the beginning, I could tell Linda didn't really understand what I do for work. Every time it comes up, she smiles tightly and says things like, "Oh, that's very creative," or "So you're still doing that." Tonight, Andrew invited me to dinner at his parents' house. It was supposed to be casual, just pizza and salad. His younger sister Rachel was there with her husband, Kevin, and their toddler. I was already a little on edge because family gatherings always make me nervous, and I knew work would come up eventually. At first, everything was fine. We talked about the weather, Rachel's kids starting daycare, and Michael's new grill. Then, Linda asked me how work was going. I said it was busy and that I had just signed a new client. She asked what kind of client, and I explained it was a regional nonprofit that needed help with video campaigns and social media. She laughed, not a polite little chuckle, but a full laugh like she had heard a joke. She said, "Wow, I thought those places just had interns do that stuff for free." Kevin laughed too, and Rachel gave him a look but didn't say anything. I felt my face get hot. I tried to brush it off and said, "Well, they decided to hire a professional." Linda smiled and said, "Well, that's nice, dear, but you know, those kinds of jobs aren't very stable. Have you thought about doing something more permanent? Maybe going back to school?" Andrew was sitting right next to me, and he stayed quiet. That hurt more than anything else. I said calmly that I liked what I do and that it pays well enough. Linda tilted her head and said, "Well enough for now, maybe, but Andrew's at a point where he needs to think about his future." She said this while looking directly at him, not at me. Something in me snapped. I didn't raise my voice, but I stopped smiling. I said, "Linda, with all due respect, my career choices are not a joke, and they are not up for debate at the dinner table." The room went silent. Michael cleared his throat. Rachel stared at her plate. Linda looked shocked, like I had slapped her. She said, Excuse me, I'm just being honest and looking out for my son." I said, "Your honesty feels a lot like disrespect. I work hard and I support myself, and I don't appreciate being laughed at." Andrew finally spoke and said, "Mom, maybe we should change the subject. Linda stood up and said I was being rude in her own home. I said I didn't mean to be rude, but I wasn't going to sit there and be mocked. Linda said if I was so sensitive, maybe I shouldn't come to family dinners. That's when Andrew stood up and said, okay, that's enough. He told me we should go. We left without eating. The car ride was awful. Andrew said he understood why I was upset, but that I could have handled it better. He said his mom didn't mean it that way, and that she's just blunt. I asked him why he didn't defend me when she laughed. He said he didn't realize it bothered me that much at first. That honestly crushed me. When he dropped me off, he said we should take a day or two to cool off. I said fine. Now I'm sitting here wondering if I just ruined my relationship by finally standing up for myself. Part of me feels proud that I didn't just swallow it like I usually do. Another part of me feels like I embarrassed him in front of his family and confirmed everything his mom already thinks about me. I keep thinking about Linda saying Andrew needs to think about his future like I'm some kind of risk factor or phase. I love Andrew, and I've supported him through stressful job changes and family issues. I never once implied he wasn't good enough for me. I don't know what to do next. Do I apologize to keep the peace even though I don't think I was wrong? Do I expect Andrew to set boundaries with his mom? Is this a red flag that I should not ignore? I feel like if I don't address this now, it will only get worse, but I'm also scared of pushing too hard and losing him. I'm not asking for validation that I'm perfect because I know I'm not. I just need outside perspectives because right now my head is a mess and I don't trust my own judgment. I never wanted to be in a situation where I felt like I had to choose between my self-respect and my relationship, but here I am. Update: my boyfriend's mom laughed at my job at dinner and I finally snapped. I waited a few days before writing this because I needed time to process everything and honestly to calm down. A lot has happened since that dinner, and while things are still not perfectly resolved, I feel like I owe an update because the situation took turns I didn't fully expect. The morning after I posted, Andrew texted me like nothing had happened and asked how my day was going. That alone annoyed me more than I thought it would. I didn't want small talk. I wanted acknowledgement. I replied politely but short. By the afternoon, he asked if I was still upset, and I told him yes, and that we needed to actually talk about what happened instead of pretending it didn't. We met up that evening at a coffee shop near my apartment. I chose a public place on purpose because I didn't trust myself not to cry or get emotional. When he sat down, he looked tired and uncomfortable, which honestly mirrored how I felt. I told him straight up that what hurt me most wasn't his mom's comments, but his silence. I explained how alone I felt sitting there while his family laughed and judged me. I told him I needed a partner, not someone who stays neutral when I'm being disrespected. At first, he got defensive. He said he was put on the spot and didn't want to escalate things with his mom. He said he grew up learning that it was easier to let her say her piece than argue because she never backs down. That right there felt like a huge realization. I asked him if he expected me to just accept that dynamic forever. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence was loud. I told him I wasn't asking him to cut off his family or yell at his mom. I was asking for basic support and boundaries. I said, if we were going to build a future together, I couldn't always be the one biting my tongue while everyone else gets to be comfortable. I also told him I would not apologize to his mom for defending myself, because that would teach her that she can treat me that way without consequences. Andrew admitted that he underestimated how serious this was. He said hearing me frame it as a future issue made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He apologized for not speaking up and said he should have shut the conversation down when she laughed. That apology mattered to me more than I expected. It didn't fix everything, but it helped. The harder part came 2 days later when he told me he had spoken to his mom. Apparently, Linda called him the day after the dinner upset that he left early and accusing me of being disrespectful and overly sensitive. Andrew told her that laughing at my job and questioning my stability was inappropriate. According to him, she did not take that well. She said she was just being honest and that she worries he's settling. That phrase hurt even hearing it secondhand. Settling. Like I'm a compromise instead of a choice. Andrew told her that my career is not a hobby and that I support myself, and that even if she doesn't understand it, she needs to respect it. He also told her that if she can't be kind to me, then we won't be attending family dinners for a while. When he told me that, I actually teared up. I didn't expect him to go that far. Linda apparently responded by saying she feels like she's being painted as the villain for caring about her son. She said she won't apologize because she doesn't think she did anything wrong. Andrew told me he ended the conversation after that because it was going nowhere. Here's where things get complicated. A couple days after that, Linda sent me a text. It was long and very carefully worded. She said she was sorry if her words came across as hurtful, but that she believes honesty is important in families. She said she grew up valuing stable careers and worries about Andrew being the primary provider someday. She did not actually apologize for laughing or for questioning my choices. It felt more like an explanation than remorse. I sat on that text for hours. Part of me wanted to fire back and defend myself point by point. Another part of me wanted to ignore it completely. I ended up replying calmly. I told her I understand that we come from different backgrounds, but that laughing at my work and implying I'm a liability was hurtful. I said I'm open to having respectful conversations, but not ones where I'm talked down to. I wished her well and left it at that. She hasn't replied. Andrew and I are still together. We've had a lot of heavy conversations over the past week about boundaries, marriage, finances, and expectations. Things we probably should have talked about earlier, but didn't. I told him I need to know that if this happens again, he will step in immediately. He said he understands and that he's working on unlearning some things from his upbringing. I believe he means it, but I also know words only go so far. I won't lie and say everything feels perfect now. There's a crack that wasn't there before. I see his family differently, and I see him differently too. At the same time, I also saw him choose me in a way he hadn't before, and that counts for something. I don't know what the long-term outcome will be. I know I'm no longer willing to shrink myself to make others comfortable. If that cost me relationships, then they probably weren't as solid as I thought. For now, I'm taking things one step at a time and paying close attention to actions instead of promises. Update: my boyfriend's mom laughed at my job at dinner, and I finally snapped. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I wanted to wait until things actually settled instead of posting while emotions were still raw. A lot happened quietly after that last conversation, and I think this is the real ending to the situation, no matter what happens next. After Linda stopped responding to my text, there was a strange period of silence. No family group chats, no invites, nothing. Andrew told me his mom was taking space, which I found ironic, considering I was the one who had been disrespected. Still, I didn't push it. I focused on work and honestly threw myself into a big project that came in at the perfect time. The nonprofit I mentioned earlier renewed my contract and expanded the scope. I was excited and proud, and I realized something important. I didn't feel the urge to tell Andrew's family at all. That realization sat with me longer than I expected. About 10 days later, Andrew asked if I would be willing to come with him to his parents' house for a short visit. He said his dad wanted to talk, and that his mom had agreed to keep things civil. I didn't want to go. My body reacted before my brain did. Tight chest. Knots in my stomach. That told me a lot. I told Andrew I would only go if he understood that I would leave the second things turned disrespectful, and that I wouldn't argue or explain myself. He agreed. When we got there, Michael greeted me warmly and gave me an awkward half hug. Linda was polite in a stiff, formal way. We sat in the living room and made small talk for a few minutes until Michael cleared his throat and said he wanted to address what happened at dinner weeks ago. Linda stayed quiet, which was new. Michael said that while the dinner got out of hand, he didn't think anyone intended to hurt anyone else, but that intentions don't erase impact. He said he watched me shrink at the table and that he regretted not speaking up either. That surprised me. He said he worked with plenty of contractors and consultants over the years and that success doesn't look the same anymore. He said if Andrew chose me, then that should be enough for them. Linda finally spoke. She said she still worries about Andrew's future, but admitted that laughing was wrong. She said she didn't realize how dismissive she sounded, and that she felt embarrassed being called out in front of everyone. She said she's used to being the authority in the room and reacted badly when that dynamic shifted. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was flawed and a little self-centered, but it was the closest thing to accountability I think she's capable of right now. I thanked her for acknowledging it and told her I'm not asking her to understand my career, just to respect it. I said I care about Andrew deeply and I want a peaceful relationship, but not at the cost of my dignity. She nodded and said she would try. On the drive home, Andrew apologized again, not just for that night, but for the pattern that led up to it. He admitted that he's always been afraid of disappointing his parents and that it's easier for him to minimize things than confront them. He said seeing me stand up for myself forced him to confront how passive he's been. He told me he started therapy. I didn't ask him to do that. He did it on his own. Here's the part I didn't expect. A week after that visit, Andrew told me he wanted to slow things down, not break up, but reassess. He said he loves me, but realized he needs to grow a lot before he can be the partner I deserve long term. He said he doesn't want to make promises he can't keep yet. That hurt. A lot. But it was also the most honest thing he's ever said to me. We decided to take a step back from future planning and focus on the present. We're still together, but with clearer boundaries and less pressure. I told him I won't wait forever for someone to choose me fully, and he said he understands. As for Linda, our interactions are polite and limited. I no longer feel the need to win her approval. That weight is gone, and I didn't realize how heavy it was until it lifted. The biggest change is in me. I don't feel ashamed of my job anymore. I don't feel the need to over-explain or justify my choices. I realized that snapping wasn't me losing control. It was me hitting a limit, and that limit protected me. No matter what happens with Andrew, I know one thing for sure. I didn't ruin my relationship by standing up for myself. I revealed the parts that needed to be addressed. Stories number 5. My daughter's grandparents want full custody after her mom died during childbirth, and I don't know if I'm wrong for considering it. I never thought I would be writing something like this, and honestly, I am still in shock that this is my life now. A little over a year ago, my partner died during childbirth. Saying that sentence still feels unreal. Her name was Emily. We were together for 5 years and expecting our first child. The pregnancy was mostly normal until the very end, when everything went wrong very fast. I was in the hospital room when it happened, and that image is burned into my head. One minute I was holding her hand and telling her she was doing great, and the next minute doctors were rushing in and pushing me out of the way. Emily never got to hold our daughter. She never even got to see her. I went home from the hospital with a newborn and a death certificate. Our daughter is named Lily. She is the only reason I got out of bed in those first months. I loved her instantly, but I would be lying if I said I felt ready to be a single parent overnight. I was barely holding myself together. I took 3 months off work and moved into survival mode. Feed the baby. Change the baby. Try not to cry in front of her. Sleep when she sleeps. Repeat. Emily's parents, Carol and Richard, were very involved from the beginning. They adored Emily and were excited to be grandparents. After the funeral, they offered to help, and at first I was grateful. They live about 30 minutes away and would come over almost every day. Carol cooked meals. Richard fixed things around the house. They held Lily so I could shower or take a nap. I honestly don't know how I would have survived without that help early on. But as time went on, things started to feel less like help and more like pressure. Carol would comment on how tired I looked and how hard it must be to do this alone. She would say things like Emily would have wanted Lily with family, or babies need a mother's touch. At first I brushed it off as grief talking. They lost their daughter. I lost my partner. Everyone was hurting. When Lily was about 4 months old, Carol started suggesting that Lily stay overnight at their house to give me a break. I said no. I wasn't ready for that, and Lily was still waking up multiple times a night. Carol didn't push then, but she didn't hide her disappointment either. She started bringing it up every visit. Richard was quieter, but he would nod along. I went back to work when Lily was 5 months old. I work full-time in it, and my schedule is mostly 9 to 5, but sometimes emergencies come up. I found a daycare that I felt good about. The first day dropping Lily off felt like ripping my heart out. Carol told me daycare was dangerous and full of germs. She said Lily would be safer with her. I told her this was my decision. Over the next few months, the comments got worse. Carol questioned everything. The formula I chose, the clothes Lily wore, the daycare, my parenting in general. If Lily cried, Carol would swoop in and take her from my arms. If I asked for space, Carol would get offended and say she was just trying to help. The breaking point came when Lily was 8 months old. I came home from work, and Carol and Richard were already at my house. I hadn't invited them. Carol said they were worried because I didn't answer my phone earlier. My phone had died in a meeting. Carol then sat me down and said they wanted to talk seriously. She said they believed Lily would have a better life with them. She said they had a big house, flexible schedules, and experience raising children. She said Emily would have wanted them to step in. She asked me to consider giving them full custody while still being involved as Lily's father. I felt like I had been punched. I told them absolutely not. I said Lily is my daughter, and I am not giving her away. Carol started crying and said she was afraid for Lily's future with a single father who is clearly overwhelmed. Richard said they weren't trying to take Lily from me, but they thought this was best for everyone. I asked them to leave. After that, things were tense. They backed off for a bit, but the idea was planted in my head, and I hate that. I started noticing how exhausted I was, how lonely, how much I still struggle with grief. Some nights after Lily goes to sleep, I just sit on the couch, staring at nothing. I love her more than anything, but I am scared of messing this up. I am scared that my grief and stress will hurt her. A few weeks later, I got a letter from a lawyer. Carol and Richard were asking about their rights as grandparents and wanted to discuss custody options. They weren't officially filing anything yet, but the message was clear. They were serious. I met with my own lawyer, who told me that as Lily's biological father, with no issues of abuse or neglect, I have full rights. But he also said that legal battles are expensive and emotionally draining. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about Emily, about what she would want, about Lily's future. Carol and Richard genuinely love Lily. They are stable and financially comfortable. They have time. I have love, but I am stretched thin. I started wondering if considering some form of custody arrangement made me a bad father or a realistic one. I brought this up with my sister, Megan. She told me I was even thinking about this because I was exhausted and grieving. She said giving up custody would break me in the long run. My friend Jason said something similar, but also admitted that single parenting is brutal and there is no shame in needing help. I tried setting boundaries with Carol and Richard. I told them their comments were hurting me and that legal threats were unacceptable. Carol said I was being defensive and that they were only thinking of Lily. She said if I truly loved my daughter, I would put her needs above my pride. That comment stuck with me in the worst way. Some days I feel strong and sure of myself. I watch Lily laugh or take a wobbly step and I know she belongs with me. Other days I feel like I am drowning. I miss Emily so much it hurts to breathe. I feel guilty that Lily will never know her mom. I feel guilty when I am short-tempered or distracted. I wonder if Carol is right and if Lily deserves more than what I can give alone right now. I have not agreed to anything. I have not told Carol and Richard that I am considering this. But the fact that the thought even crossed my mind makes me feel like a terrible parent. I don't want to lose my daughter. I also don't want my pride to get in the way of what is best for her. I feel stuck between protecting my role as her father and admitting that I am struggling more than I want to. I guess I am here because I don't trust my own judgment anymore. Am I wrong for even considering giving Lily's grandparents full custody after losing her mom? Or am I just a grieving parent trying to survive an impossible situation? Update. My daughter's grandparents want full custody after her mom died during childbirth, and I don't know if I'm wrong for considering it. A lot has happened since I first wrote this, and I honestly didn't expect things to escalate as fast as they did. Reading through the responses helped more than I can explain. It also scared me, because so many people pointed out things I was trying not to see. A few days after I posted, Carol showed up at my house again without calling. Lily was napping, and I asked her to please keep her voice down. Carol ignored that, and immediately started talking about how worried she was about Lily, and how much stress I seemed to be under. I asked her to leave. She didn't. She said she deserved to be heard. That was the moment something clicked for me. I realized this wasn't about concern anymore. This was about control. I told her very clearly that I was not giving up custody, and that if she continued to show up unannounced or talk about taking my daughter, I would limit contact. Carol started crying and said she couldn't lose Lily too. I told her I wasn't taking Lily away from them, but that this behavior was not okay. Richard showed up about 10 minutes later, because Carol had apparently called him from her car. That turned into a full argument on my front lawn. My neighbors definitely heard everything. Richard said they had already spoken to their lawyer again, and that they believed a judge would see how overwhelmed I was. Hearing that made me feel sick. I told them they needed to leave, and that any future communication would go through my lawyer. They accused me of being cold and heartless, and of using Lily as a weapon. They left after that, but Carol yelled that Emily would be ashamed of me. That line hurt more than anything else they said. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head and imagining worst-case scenarios. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him everything. He advised me to document every interaction and to stop allowing unsupervised visits for now. He also suggested I look into therapy both for myself and eventually for Lily. I took his advice. I found a grief counselor and had my first session the following week. I didn't realize how much I had been bottling up. Talking about Emily out loud without feeling like I had to be strong for someone else was overwhelming but also relieving. My therapist was very clear about one thing. Feeling exhausted and grieving does not make me an unfit parent. I also adjusted my work schedule. I talked to my manager and explained my situation more honestly than I ever had. To my surprise, he was incredibly understanding and allowed me to work from home 2 days a week. That alone made a huge difference. I felt more present and less like I was constantly failing at everything. As for Carol and Richard, I sent them a message through my lawyer setting firm boundaries. Visits would be scheduled in advance. No more discussions about custody. No more legal threats. If those boundaries were crossed, visits would stop. They did not take it well at first. Carol sent a long email about how unfair I was being and how they were only trying to protect Lily. I did not respond directly. My lawyer handled it. For a few weeks, things were quiet. They saw Lily once every other week with me present. Carol was noticeably colder, but she behaved. Richard mostly stayed quiet. Lily didn't seem affected either way. She is at that age where she is curious about everything and honestly just wants snacks and toys and cuddles. Watching her grow more confident and playful reminded me why I need to stay strong for her. Then, something unexpected happened. Richard asked to meet me alone. I was hesitant, but agreed to meet at a coffee shop. He looked exhausted. He told me that Carol was not handling Emily's death well, and that her fixation on Lily had become unhealthy. He admitted that pushing for custody was a mistake, and that it came from fear, not logic. He said he didn't want to lose Lily or me, and that he hoped we could find a way forward without courts involved. That conversation changed things. I told him I understood their grief, but that Lily is my daughter, and I am not optional in her life. I told him I am open to them being involved as grandparents, not as replacements. Richard apologized. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Since then, Carol has softened a little. She hasn't apologized, but she has backed off. I am staying cautious. I trust actions more than words right now. The biggest change is in me. I no longer feel ashamed for struggling. I am tired. Yes. I am grieving. Yes. But I am also Lily's dad, and I am doing my best. I stopped asking myself if I am enough and started asking what support I need to be enough. I never seriously considered signing custody over after reading everything back and seeing how quickly that could have spiraled. The fact that they went to lawyers instead of supporting me told me everything I needed to know. Lily is sleeping on my chest as I write this. She smells like baby shampoo and applesauce. I still miss Emily every single day, and that probably won't ever change. But I know now that giving up my daughter would not have honored Emily. It would have destroyed me. Things are still complicated, and I am sure there will be more challenges ahead. But for the first time since Emily died, I feel like I am standing on solid ground instead of sinking. Update: my daughter's grandparents want full custody after her mom died during childbirth, and I don't know if I'm wrong for considering it. I waited a while before writing this because I wanted to be sure I wasn't reacting emotionally or in the middle of another crisis. Things have settled enough now that I can finally breathe and look back at everything with a clearer head. After my last update, I kept therapy going regularly, and that alone changed more than I expected. I started to understand how much guilt I had been carrying without realizing it. Guilt for surviving when Emily didn't. Guilt for not being able to give Lily a mother. Guilt for feeling tired or frustrated. Once I stopped seeing those feelings as proof that I was failing, I became a better parent almost immediately. I was more patient. I laughed more. I was present instead of constantly second-guessing myself. Carol and Richard remained cautious but calmer. Visits continued every other week with me there. Carol still has moments where she tries to overstep, usually with comments about what Lily should be doing or how Emily would have done things differently. I don't argue anymore. I calmly correct her or change the subject. If she pushes, the visit ends. The first time I actually followed through and asked them to leave early, she was shocked. After that, the behavior improved. A couple of months ago, something happened that really confirmed I made the right choice. Lily got sick with a pretty bad ear infection and had a high fever. I missed 2 days of work to stay home with her. Carol found out and immediately started texting about how this was exactly what she meant when she said I couldn't handle everything alone. She suggested Lily stay with them for the week. I said no. Carol kept pushing and then said maybe this wouldn't be an issue if we had moved forward with custody arrangements. Instead of spiraling like I would have before, I took screenshots and sent them straight to my lawyer. He sent a firm response reminding them of the boundaries and warning that continued pressure could affect their access to Lily. After that message, Carol went completely quiet for a while. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was just clear and final. And honestly, that felt empowering. Richard later apologized again, this time without excuses. He admitted that Carol still struggles with seeing Lily as Emily's replacement rather than her own person. He said he's encouraging Carol to get therapy as well. I hope she does. I really do. I don't hate them. I know their pain comes from losing their daughter. But I also know that pain doesn't give them the right to rewrite Lily's life or mine. Lily is doing great. She started saying a few words and tries to copy everything I do. She laughs when I sing to her, even though I'm terrible at it. She reaches for me when she's scared or tired. Those moments erase any lingering doubt I had. This is where she belongs. With me. I also made one more big decision. I created a legal will and guardianship plan. If something happens to me, Lily will go to my sister Megan, not Carol and Richard. That was not an easy choice, but it was the right one. Megan respects boundaries and sees Lily as her own person, not a second chance as something lost. My lawyer helped make everything official. Knowing that plan is in place gives me peace I didn't realize I needed. Emily still comes up in conversation sometimes. I talk about her to Lily even though she's too young to understand. I show her pictures. I tell her how much her mom loved her. I stopped avoiding Emily's memory out of fear that it would hurt too much. It hurts, yes, but it also feels right. Looking back, I understand why I even considered giving up custody. I was drowning in grief, in exhaustion, and fear. I wasn't weak, I was human. But I also see now that handing Lily over would not have saved me or her. It would have delayed the healing and added a lifetime of regret. Things aren't perfect. Single parenting is still hard. Some nights I still feel lonely once Lily is asleep. Some days I still wish Emily were here to see the little moments. But I no longer doubt my place in my daughter's life. Stories number 6. My parents think I'm entitled for asking for help with a house down payment, and now my family is split. I never imagined that asking my own parents for help would turn into one of the most painful and divisive experiences of my adult life. I keep replaying the moment in my head, wondering if I said something wrong, if my tone was off, or if I should have never opened my mouth at all. What makes this worse is that I didn't ask out of greed or laziness. I asked because I felt like I was drowning, and they were the only people I thought might throw me a lifeline. I'm in my early 30s, and I've done everything I was told I was supposed to do. I went to college, worked part-time while studying, graduated with loans, and spent the last decade building a stable career. I don't live extravagantly. I don't take luxury vacations. I drive an old car that's paid off, and I track my spending carefully. Despite all of that, the idea of owning a home feels almost impossible where I live. Rent keeps going up every year. What used to feel manageable now feels like a slow bleed. I'm paying more than I ever have and somehow getting less in return. No stability, no equity, no sense of permanence. Just a constant fear that my lease won't be renewed or that the rent will jump again and push me out. About a year ago, I started seriously looking into buying a home. Not a dream house, not a mansion, just a modest place where I could finally feel settled. After running the numbers over and over, it became clear that my biggest obstacle wasn't my income or my credit. It was the down payment. I could afford the monthly mortgage, but saving a large lump sum while paying rent felt like trying to run uphill in sand. That's when I started thinking about my parents. They are financially comfortable, not billionaire rich, but very secure. They paid off their house years ago. They travel often. They recently renovated their kitchen just because they wanted a different look. Growing up, I never felt like we were struggling. They always emphasized planning and saving and being responsible. They also helped my younger sibling in a big way a few years ago by covering a large chunk of their wedding and helping them with a car. So I didn't think my request was outrageous. I spent weeks debating whether to ask. I was embarrassed. I hated the idea of looking like I couldn't handle my own life. But after talking it through with friends and even a financial advisor, I decided to approach it as a loan or early inheritance, not a handout. I wasn't asking them to buy me a house. I was asking for help with the down payment so I could finally stop bleeding money into rent. I asked to sit down with them and talk. I explained my situation calmly. I showed them my budget. I showed them how much I'd saved on my own. I explained that $30,000 would make the difference between continuing to rent indefinitely and being able to buy a modest home. I told them I was willing to sign something formal, to pay it back over time, or to have it deducted from whatever inheritance I might one day receive. The reaction was not what I expected. My mom went quiet almost immediately. My dad leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. After a long pause, he asked me why I thought they should be responsible for helping me buy a house. The way he said it made my stomach drop. It wasn't curious. It was defensive. I tried to explain that I wasn't saying they were responsible. I was asking if they were willing. He cut me off and said when they were my age, no one helped them, and they figured it out on their own. My mom nodded and said that struggling builds character and that renting isn't the end of the world. Something about that broke me a little. They bought their house decades ago when prices were a fraction of what they are now. Their mortgage was less than what I pay in rent. They didn't have student loans the way my generation does. I didn't say any of that out loud, but I felt it. I reminded them that they helped my sibling in big ways. My dad immediately said that was different. He said a wedding and a car were not the same as a house. He said a house was a major asset and they didn't feel comfortable being involved. My mom added that they worried it would set a precedent and that I might expect help again in the future. That stung. I've never been someone who constantly asks them for money. I've always been proud of my independence. Hearing them frame me as someone who would become dependent on them hurt more than I expected. I told them I understood if the answer was no, but I didn't understand why they seemed almost offended that I asked. My dad said he felt like I was acting entitled to their money. That word hit me like a slap. Entitled, as if I was demanding something I hadn't earned. The conversation ended awkwardly. No resolution, just tension hanging in the air. A few days later, I found out my parents had talked to my sibling about it. Not to get advice, but to vent. My sibling called me and told me I was out of line. They said our parents worked hard for what they have and that I shouldn't expect them to bail me out just because the market is tough. They also said that comparing my situation to the help they received was unfair. That conversation turned into an argument. I pointed out that help is help, even if it comes in different forms. They accused me of being bitter and jealous. I hung up feeling like the bad guy in my own family. Since then, family gatherings have been tense. My parents are polite but distant. My mom makes comments about how renting gives flexibility. My dad keeps bringing up articles about people who started with nothing and succeeded without help. It feels passive-aggressive and exhausting. What hurts the most is that this has changed how I see them. I always believed that family helps family when they can. I'm not asking them to sacrifice their security. $30,000 would not impact their lifestyle in any meaningful way. But the emotional cost of asking seems to have been enormous. I've started questioning myself constantly. Was I wrong to ask? Was it inappropriate? Did I cross some invisible line? Or am I just living in a different reality than they are? One where doing everything right still doesn't guarantee stability. I'm still renting. I'm still saving. I haven't brought the topic up again. But the distance between us feels real and heavy. I don't know if I owe them an apology or if I need to stand by the fact that asking for help does not automatically make someone entitled. I never thought that a simple question about a down payment would make me feel like a stranger in my own family. Now, I'm left wondering whether the real issue is money or if it's the uncomfortable truth that our ideas of responsibility and support no longer align at all. Update. My parents think I'm entitled for asking for help with a house down payment, and now my family is split. A lot has happened since that conversation, and I didn't expect things to spiral the way they did. At first, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I went to family dinners, answered texts, and avoided anything that might reopen the discussion. That worked for about a month before the tension became impossible to ignore. It started with small comments that added up over time. My mom would casually mention how renting gives you freedom and how home ownership can be a trap. My dad would bring up coworkers' kids who lived with their parents into their 40s and how they worried about enabling them. None of it was said directly to me, but it was obvious who the audience was. Eventually, I asked my parents if we could talk again because I hated how uncomfortable everything felt. This time, I went in determined not to ask for money again, but just to clear the air. I told them I respected their decision even though it hurt. I told them I wasn't angry about the money itself, but about being labeled entitled for asking a question. My mom surprised me by getting emotional. She said she felt like I was accusing them of failing me somehow. She said when I asked for that amount, it made her feel like everything they had already done wasn't enough. I hadn't considered that angle at all. To me, the request was practical. To her, it was personal. My dad doubled down. He said he worried that if they helped me now, they would be responsible for me forever. He said they had seen friends loan money to their kids and never get it back, and that it destroyed relationships. He said saying no was their way of protecting the family. I told him that saying no had already damaged the relationship, just in a different way. That stopped him for a moment, but not long enough to change his stance. Things got more complicated when my sibling got involved again. Apparently, my parents had asked them whether they thought helping me would be a mistake. My sibling told me this during a tense phone call. They said they felt like I was putting them in the middle and making them choose sides even though I never asked them to. They also admitted that if the situation were reversed, they didn't know if our parents would help them the same way again. That admission stuck with me. Not long after that, my parents invited the whole family over for dinner. I thought it was an attempt to reset things. Instead, it turned into an unexpected announcement. They told us they had decided to set up a formal trust for any future financial help, and that no one would receive large sums of money outside of that structure. They said this was to be fair and avoid resentment. On the surface, it sounded reasonable. In reality, it felt like a direct response to me. The trust would only be accessible years down the line under very specific conditions. It didn't help me now at all. My sibling looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. After that night, I felt oddly calm, not relieved, not happy, just resigned. It became clear that continuing to hope for their help was only keeping me emotionally stuck. I decided to move forward assuming I was on my own financially, no matter what. I adjusted my plans. I started looking at smaller places in less ideal areas. I picked up some freelance work on the side. I cut back even more aggressively on spending. It's exhausting, but at least it's within my control. What I didn't expect was the shift in my parents' behavior once I stopped engaging. My mom started checking in more, asking how work was going, asking if I was eating okay. My dad sent me an article about first-time homebuyer programs without any commentary. It felt like they wanted to help, but only in ways that didn't involve writing a check. Emotionally, I'm still conflicted. Part of me understands their fears. Money does complicate relationships. Another part of me can't shake the feeling that they helped when it was convenient and drew a hard line when it became uncomfortable. I've stopped talking about housing with them altogether. When they ask, I give vague answers. It's easier than reopening wounds. But that distance hasn't fully closed the gap. There's still an unspoken tension that lingers beneath every interaction. I don't know how this will end yet. Maybe I'll eventually buy a place on my own, and this will all feel like a bad memory. Maybe resentment will fade with time. Or maybe this will always be the moment when I realized that my parents' idea of support didn't extend as far as I thought it did. For now, all I can do is keep moving forward and remind myself that asking for help was not a moral failing, even if the answer was no. Final update. My parents think I'm entitled for asking for help with a house down payment, and now my family is split. It took a long time for things to settle enough for me to feel like this was truly the end of the situation and not just another phase. Months passed after that last conversation, and life kept moving whether I felt ready or not. I focused on work, picked up extra hours where I could, and kept saving. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't fast, but it was steady. The real turning point came when my lease renewal notice arrived with yet another rent increase. For a day or two, I spiraled. Then something in me just hardened into resolve. I realized I couldn't keep emotionally orbiting my parents' choices. Whether they helped or not, my life had to keep going. I started looking farther out than I ever wanted to before. Longer commute, older buildings, smaller spaces. It was humbling, but also oddly grounding. After months of searching, I found a small townhouse in a quiet area that most people overlook. It wasn't perfect. It needed work, but it was within reach. I didn't have the full down payment I originally wanted, but I qualified for a first-time buyer program and paired it with everything I had saved. It was terrifying signing those papers knowing I had almost no financial cushion left, but it was also the first time in a long while that I felt in control again. I didn't tell my parents until everything was finalized. When I finally did, their reactions were complicated. My mom cried, but not in the way I expected. She said she was proud of me and sorry if they ever made me feel unsupported. She didn't explicitly apologize for saying no, but it was the closest I've ever heard her come. My dad shook my hand and said I should be proud of doing it on my own. There was pride in his voice, but also something else, maybe regret. Maybe relief that the issue was resolved without them having to change their stance. My sibling was quieter. Later, they admitted they admired that I pushed through instead of letting the situation define me. They also admitted they hadn't realized how deep the hurt went at the time. That conversation helped more than I expected. The distance between me and my parents didn't disappear overnight, but it softened. We stopped circling the issue. We started talking about normal things again. There are still moments when I feel a sting, like when my mom comments on how stressful homeownership must be, or when my dad brings up how independence builds character. But I no longer feel the urge to argue back. I've already proven what I needed to prove to myself. Looking back, I don't regret asking. It forced uncomfortable truths into the open. It showed me where my parents' boundaries are and where mine needed to be. It also showed me that financial help is not the same thing as emotional support, and that people can care deeply while still saying no. I've accepted that my parents see money as something that should only flow one way once you're an adult. I don't agree with it, but I understand it now. And understanding it has helped me let go of a lot of resentment. The house is slowly becoming a home. I'm fixing things bit by bit, painting walls on weekends, learning how to do repairs I never thought I'd handle. Every improvement feels earned. Exhausting, but earned. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that asking for help doesn't make you entitled, and not receiving it doesn't mean you failed. It just means everyone is operating from their own fears and values. Sometimes those align, and sometimes they don't. My relationship with my parents is different now. More cautious, more realistic, but also more honest. I don't expect them to rescue me anymore, and they don't expect me to ask. In a strange way, that clarity has brought a kind of peace. This didn't end with a dramatic apology or a check being written. It ended with me standing in a small, imperfect house that I own, realizing that while the path here was lonelier than I hoped, it was still mine. And that has to be enough. Stories number 7. My husband outed me to his parents, and now I do not want to see my in-laws. I am writing this because I feel like I am losing my mind, and I need outside perspective from people who are not emotionally invested in keeping the peace at my expense. I am married, and until recently, I thought my husband and I were solid even when we disagreed. Now I feel like the ground under me has shifted, and everyone expects me to just smile and move on. I grew up in a household where privacy was everything. You did not share someone else's story without permission. That belief is deeply rooted in me, and it matters for what happened. When I met my husband a few years ago, I was very honest with him about who I am. I trusted him with parts of myself that I had not shared with many people. He told me he loved me and that my identity did not change how he saw me. I believed him. We talked about what we would share with family and what we would keep between us. He agreed that some things were ours alone. His parents are very traditional. They are polite, but opinionated, and they do not hide how they feel about things that fall outside their worldview. From the beginning, I kept a respectful distance. I was friendly. I showed up to holidays. I did not overshare. I thought that was the right balance. A few months ago, my husband and I had a rough patch. It was not explosive, but it was heavy. We argued about communication and about how often he would dismiss my feelings by saying I was overthinking. One night after an argument, he left the house to cool off. I assumed he went for a drive or to a friend's place. I found out later he went to his parents. The next day his mother called me. That alone was unusual. She asked if we could talk. Her tone was stiff. During that conversation, she brought up something very personal about me that I had never told her. I froze. My heart started pounding because I knew immediately where it came from. She said she was concerned about my influence on her son and about what kind of life choices we were making. I asked her how she knew any of that. She hesitated and then said my husband told them because he was worried and needed guidance. I ended the call as calmly as I could and then confronted my husband when he got home. He admitted it without much hesitation. He said he was overwhelmed and needed support. He said they are his parents and he should be able to talk to them about his life. I told him that what he did felt like a betrayal. I reminded him of our conversations about privacy. I explained how unsafe and exposed I felt. He apologized, but it felt shallow. He kept saying he did not think it would be a big deal. He said they already suspected anyway. That sentence hurt more than he realizes. Since then, his parents have been different toward me. Not openly hostile, but colder. His father barely speaks to me now. His mother makes passive comments about values and family traditions. Every visit leaves me tense and drained. I started declining invitations. I told my husband I needed space and that I was not ready to see them. That is when the pressure started. My husband says I am punishing him for a mistake. He says avoiding his parents only makes things worse. He says I need to be the bigger person. His sister reached out and told me I was tearing the family apart by holding on to resentment. Even my own friends are split. Some say I am justified. Others say I should let it go for the sake of my marriage. What makes this harder is that no one seems to understand that this was not just gossip. This was my identity. Something I shared in trust. Once it was out, I could not take it back. I lost control over my own narrative. I feel like I am constantly being evaluated when I am around them. I suggested couples therapy. My husband agreed, but also said he hoped the therapist would help me move past it. That comment made me feel like the problem again. In therapy, I explained how outing someone without consent can cause lasting harm. The therapist backed me up on that. My husband listened, but I am not sure it truly sank in. The legal side of me even wondered if I had any rights here. Not because I want to sue anyone, but because the violation felt that severe. I learned that while what he did was deeply unethical, it was not illegal. That knowledge did not comfort me. It just made me feel more alone with it. Right now I am stuck. I love my husband, but I am struggling to trust him. I do not want to walk into a house where I feel judged and unsafe. I do not want to pretend everything is fine to make other people comfortable. At the same time, I am scared of what this means for my marriage long term. I keep asking myself if I am being unreasonable, if refusing to see my in-laws is an overreaction, if I should just swallow my discomfort and move on. But every time I imagine sitting at their dinner table, smiling through comments that cut too close, I feel sick. I am not trying to isolate my husband from his family. I have never asked him to stop seeing them. I just want control over my own exposure while I heal from what feels like a deep breach of trust. I want acknowledgement that what happened mattered and that it changed things. So here I am asking strangers on the internet because I genuinely do not know anymore. Am I wrong for not wanting to see my in-laws after my husband outed me to them? Or is it okay to protect myself even if it makes other people uncomfortable? Update: my husband outed me to his parents, and now I do not want to see my in-laws. I did not plan on writing an update this soon, but things escalated in ways I honestly did not expect. And I feel like I need to lay it all out before I start second-guessing my own reality again. After I posted the original story, I spent a lot of time reading responses and sitting with what people said. The biggest thing that stood out to me was how many people pointed out that the core issue was not my in-laws, but my husband breaking my trust. That realization hit harder than I thought it would. After our last therapy session, I asked my husband if we could talk without trying to fix anything right away. I told him I just needed him to listen. I explained again what it felt like to have something so personal shared without my consent. I told him how unsafe I felt every time his parents looked at me differently. I told him that avoiding them was not about punishment, but about self-preservation. He was quiet for a long time, and for once did not interrupt me or tell me I was overthinking. Then he said something that changed the direction of everything. He admitted that when he went to his parents that night, he was not just looking for support. He was looking for validation. He said he felt frustrated during our argument and wanted someone to tell him he was right. He said he knew deep down that telling them what he told them would shift how they saw me, but he did it anyway because he felt hurt and wanted backup. Hearing him say that out loud made my chest feel heavy in a way I cannot fully describe. I asked him why he never told me that part before. He said because admitting it made him look selfish. That answer was honest, but it also hurt. I told him that his honesty came too late and that the damage was already done. I told him that intentions matter, but impact matters more. He started crying and saying he never meant to hurt me this badly. I believe that he did not plan the fallout, but I also believe he chose himself in that moment, knowing I would pay the price. A few days later, his mother asked to meet me one-on-one. I was hesitant, but agreed under the condition that my husband not be there. I wanted to see how she would speak to me without him mediating. We met at a coffee shop, and the conversation was uncomfortable from the start. She said she was worried about her son and about the stability of our marriage. She said she felt blindsided by what she learned, but believed she had a right to know because it involved her family. I told her calmly that while I understood her concern, she did not have a right to my private identity. I told her that learning something without consent does not create closeness, it creates distance. She seemed surprised by how firm I was. She said she never thought of it that way. I am not sure if that is true, or if she just did not expect me to push back. What stood out to me most was that she never apologized. She said she was sorry I felt uncomfortable, but not sorry for how she treated me afterward. That told me everything I needed to know. I left that meeting emotionally exhausted, but also clearer than I had been in months. When I told my husband how the meeting went, he got defensive again. He said his mother was just being honest and that I should appreciate her willingness to talk. That is when something in me snapped into place. I realized that as long as he continued to prioritize their comfort over my safety, nothing would truly change. We went back to therapy, and I laid it all out. I said I could not move forward unless he fully acknowledged that what he did was a serious breach of trust, and that pressuring me to reconcile with his parents was making it worse. The therapist asked him directly if he understood that outing someone can permanently alter how safe they feel in a family. He said yes, but his body language said he was still struggling with it. A week later, he told me he wanted to take a break. He said everything felt heavy and that he needed space to think. That conversation was strangely calm. No yelling, no blaming, just sadness. We agreed that he would stay with a friend for a while. Being alone gave me space to breathe and reflect. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that love is not enough if respect is missing. I stopped asking myself how to make everyone else comfortable and started asking what I actually need to feel whole again. As of now, we are still technically married, but separated. I am not sure what will happen next. I know I am no longer willing to shrink myself to maintain access to a family that does not fully accept me, or a partner who does not fully protect me. I am learning that boundaries are not ultimatums. They are clarity. I still do not see my in-laws, and I am at peace with that decision. If that makes me the villain in their story, I can live with it. What I cannot live with anymore is pretending that a betrayal of trust is something that can be smoothed over with time and polite smiles. I do not know how this will end, but I know one thing for sure. I am done apologizing for protecting myself. Final update. My husband outed me to his parents, and now I do not want to see my in-laws. I waited a long time before writing this because I needed to be sure that what I was feeling was not just grief talking. A lot has happened since my last update, and while it has been painful, it has also been clarifying in a way I did not expect. I am writing this now because the situation has reached a point where there really is no more waiting or wondering. After the separation, my husband and I kept limited contact, mostly about logistics and therapy sessions. For a while, he said he wanted to work on himself and prove that he could be a safe partner again. I wanted to believe him. I really did. I told him that rebuilding trust would require time, consistency, and most of all, accountability without defensiveness. He agreed to all of it verbally. In practice, it was different. He would make progress for a week or two and then slide back into minimizing. He would say things like he understood why I was hurt, but that I was still holding on to it too tightly. He kept framing healing as something I needed to hurry through. Every time he said that, it felt like reopening the same wound. The final straw came during what ended up being our last joint therapy session. The therapist asked him directly what he would do differently if he could go back to that night. He paused and then said he would probably still talk to his parents, but would ask them to be nicer to me afterward. The room went quiet. I felt my chest tighten. That answer told me everything I needed to know. Even after all this time, he still believed the core issue was how they reacted, not that he shared my identity without my consent. After that session, I told him I needed space from therapy and from him. He asked if that meant divorce. I said I did not know yet, but that I could no longer keep myself in limbo, hoping he would suddenly understand something he had been shown repeatedly. A few days later, his parents reached out to him and apparently expressed concern that our separation made the family look bad. That was the moment he chose his side. He came over to talk and told me his parents thought I was being dramatic and that if I truly loved him, I would try harder to integrate back into the family. He said he was tired of being stuck in the middle. I told him quietly that he was not in the middle. He never had been. He made a choice the moment he outed me, and he had been making the same choice ever since. I told him I wanted a divorce. Saying it out loud felt surreal, but also grounding. He did not argue. He looked defeated more than angry. He said he hoped I would not regret it. I told him I regretted staying silent longer than I should have. The divorce process itself was emotionally draining, but not legally complicated. No kids, no shared business, and we agreed to split things fairly. There were moments of sadness and even nostalgia, but there was no doubt in my mind anymore. Each document I signed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Since then, I have focused on rebuilding my life without constantly bracing for judgment. I moved into a smaller place closer to work. I reconnected with friends I had pulled away from without realizing it. I started individual therapy, and for the first time, the sessions were about me and not about managing someone else's reactions. I have not seen my in-laws, and I have no plans to. I do not feel anger toward them anymore, just distance. I understand now that acceptance cannot be negotiated and respect cannot be forced. If someone needs you to be quieter, smaller, or more palatable to belong, then that belonging is conditional and fragile. As for my ex-husband, we do not speak anymore. I wish him growth, but from afar. I no longer feel responsible for his discomfort or his learning curve. What happened taught me that love without protection is not love I am willing to accept. I am sharing this final update because I know there are people reading who are being told they are overreacting to a betrayal that cut deep. You are not wrong for wanting safety. You are not cruel for drawing lines. You are not obligated to sacrifice your identity for someone else's comfort, even if that someone is family. This chapter of my life closed with loss, but also with clarity. I know myself better now. I trust myself more. Stories number 8. My brother and his wife might be hurting their kid, and I don't know if I should say something. I'm 32, and I live about 20 minutes away from my older brother. His name is Brandon, and he's 36. He's married to his wife, Emily, who is 34. They have one child, a little boy named Noah, who just turned 3. I don't have kids, but I'm close to my family, and I spend a lot of time at their house. I babysit sometimes, I come over for dinners, and I'm usually there for birthdays and holidays. I love Noah. He's funny, loud, curious, and honestly one of the best parts of my life. The problem is that over the last year, I've started noticing things about how Brandon and Emily feed him that make me really uncomfortable. Noah is big for his age. Not just tall, but heavy. When he was a baby, everyone joked about how chunky he was, those cute baby rolls, and nobody thought anything of it. But now he's 3, and he's struggling to run. He gets tired really fast. He breathes heavy when he plays. Sometimes he just sits down and says his legs hurt. The first time it really hit me was at the park last summer. Brandon and Emily brought a huge cooler. Inside was juice boxes, soda, cookies, chips, candy, and these giant muffins from a bakery. Noah had a muffin and juice before we even got out of the car. Then at the park he had chips, then a cookie, then more juice. When other kids were running around, he tried for a bit and then just sat on the bench eating. I said something light like, "Man, he's got better snacks than I do." Emily laughed and said, "He's a growing boy, he needs fuel." I didn't push it. But it kept happening. Every visit, there's always food around him. Not just meals, but constant snacks. He wakes up and gets chocolate milk, then pancakes with syrup, then an hour later, a snack. Then lunch, usually something like nuggets, fries, or mac and cheese. Then another snack. Then dinner, which is often pizza, burgers, or pasta with a lot of cheese. Then dessert. If he cries, they give him food. If he's bored, they give him food. If he's tired, they give him food. One time, Noah threw a fit because he wanted candy before dinner. Emily said no at first, but he screamed and cried and threw himself on the floor. After a few minutes, she sighed and said, "Fine, just one, so you calm down." Then he stopped crying instantly. That bothered me more than the food itself. A few months ago, they took him to the doctor for a regular checkup. After the appointment, Brandon said, "The doctor says he's a little heavy, but kids even out as they grow." I asked, "Did they say anything about his diet?" Brandon shrugged and said, "Just the usual stuff, more fruits and veggies. Nothing changed." Last week was Noah's birthday party. There were cupcakes, cake, ice cream, candy bags, pizza, soda, juice, and cookies. I watched him eat nonstop. Other kids would eat, then go play. He just kept eating. When Emily tried to take his plate, he cried again, and she gave it back. Later that night, when most people had left, Noah was laying on the couch, breathing hard, holding his stomach. He said, "My tummy hurts." Emily rubbed his belly and said, "You just had a big party, baby." I went home feeling sick about it. The next day, I called my friend Jessica, who has 2 kids. I told her everything. She said, "That's not normal. That's not just baby chubby. That's a pattern." I asked her what I should do. She said, "If it were my nephew, I'd say something. But gently, that's the problem. I don't know how to say something without blowing up my relationship with my brother. Brandon is sensitive. He takes things personally. If he thinks you're judging his parenting, he shuts down or gets angry. Emily is the same way. She already thinks people judge her, especially other moms. A few days ago, we were all at my parents' house. My mom's name is Linda, and my dad's name is Robert. They had made grilled chicken, rice, and vegetables. Noah didn't want it. He said he wanted cookies. Emily said, "If you don't eat, you can have cookies later." He cried. She looked tired and said, "Okay, just have one now." I looked at my mom, and she looked at me. I could tell she was thinking the same thing I was, but neither of us said anything. After dinner, my mom quietly said to me in the kitchen, "I worry about him." I said, "Me too." She said, "But I don't want to lose my son over it." That scared me, because it means if I speak up, I might be the one who pays for it. But I also feel like staying quiet makes me part of the problem. I've started reading about childhood obesity, health problems, diabetes, joint issues, breathing problems. I look at Noah struggling to run, and I feel angry at the adults around him, including myself. A few days ago, I went over to their house to drop something off. Noah was sitting on the couch with a tablet and a bowl of candy. I asked, "Did you already have dinner?" Emily said, "He didn't want what we made, so we're letting him snack." I said, without thinking too much, "That's probably not great for him." She went quiet and said, "Excuse me." I said, "I just mean, he's been having a lot of junk lately." Brandon walked in and said, "What's going on?" Emily said, "Your sister thinks we're feeding our kid wrong." I said, "That's not what I said." Brandon looked at me and said, "Are you saying we're bad parents?" I said, no, I'm saying I'm worried about Noah. He said, you don't have kids. You don't get it, I said. I don't need to have kids to see he's not healthy. That was a mistake. His face changed. He said, you don't get to judge us. Emily started crying and said, everyone already judges me. I tried to fix it, but it was too late. Brandon said, you should leave. So I left. He hasn't talked to me since. Emily hasn't either. My mom said Brandon told her I attacked their parenting. I told my mom exactly what I said. She said, you weren't wrong, but maybe it wasn't the right time. Now I feel stuck. Part of me feels guilty, like I crossed a line. Another part of me feels angry that caring about my nephew's health makes me the bad guy. I keep thinking about Noah saying his legs hurt. I keep seeing him out of breath. I keep hearing him say his stomach hurts after eating too much. If I stay quiet, nothing changes. If I speak up, I might lose my brother. I don't know what's worse. I don't know if I should apologize just to keep the peace. I don't know if I should double down and try again more gently. I don't know if I should back off completely and accept that it's not my child. All I know is that I love my nephew, and I don't want him to grow up sick because the adults around him were too scared to be honest. Update: my brother and his wife might be hurting their kid, and I don't know if I should say something. It's been about 3 weeks since I was told to leave their house, and the silence from Brandon has been heavy. At first, I thought he just needed a few days to cool off. Then days turned into a week, then 2. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, but it was never him. I finally texted him. I said, I'm sorry if I hurt you. I love you and I love Noah. I just don't want to fight. He didn't reply. My mom tried talking to him. She told me he said he felt betrayed. He said he thought I saw him as a bad father now. That hurt to hear, because that's not what I think. I think he loves his kid. I just think he's handling things wrong. A few days later, my mom called me crying. She said Brandon and Emily told her she needed to stay out of it when she gently mentioned Noah's health. They said everyone was attacking them and they were tired of being judged. My mom said she backed off because she didn't want to lose access to her grandson. That made me realize something ugly. They were starting to use Noah like a shield. Anyone who said anything became the enemy. Then something happened that made it impossible for me to just let it go. Noah got sick. Not just a cold. Brandon called my mom because he was scared. Noah had trouble breathing and a high fever. They took him to the ER. He stayed overnight for observation. When my mom told me, I felt sick to my stomach. All I could think about was how tired he always looked, how heavy his breathing sounded even when he wasn't sick. He came home the next day. They said it was a respiratory infection. The doctor also talked to them again about his weight and his diet. This time, it wasn't brushed off so easily. Brandon finally called me 2 days after that. His voice sounded tired. He said, I don't want to fight anymore. I said, neither do I. He said, the doctor really laid into us. I said, what did they say? He said that Noah's weight is making things harder on his body. That he needs changes, not later, but now. There was a long silence. Then he said, I hate that you were kind of right. I didn't say anything for a moment because I didn't want to sound like I was winning. Finally, I said, I don't want to be right. I just want him okay. He asked if we could talk in person. I went over that night. Emily looked exhausted. Her eyes were red. She hugged me when I walked in, which shocked me. She said, I'm sorry I snapped at you. I felt attacked, but I was also scared. We sat at the table. Brandon said the doctor told them Noah is officially in an unhealthy weight range for his age. They were told to cut out sugary drinks, limit junk food, stick to structured meals, and stop using food as comfort. Emily said, I didn't even realize how much I was doing it until someone really spelled it out. She admitted she uses food because it works fast. She said she feels like a bad mom when he cries, and giving him something sweet makes it stop. I told her, that doesn't make you bad. It just means you're human. Brandon said, but we made it worse. They asked me why I didn't bring it up sooner. I laughed a little and said, I did. You kicked me out? They both looked embarrassed. They said they're trying now. They threw out a lot of snacks. They stopped buying soda. They started giving him water and milk instead of juice all the time. They're trying to get him outside more, even if he complains. I asked how Noah is handling it. Emily said, he cries. A lot. But he's also starting to eat things we never thought he would. She said he tried strawberries for the first time and actually liked them. That made me smile more than I expected. Things aren't magically perfect. They said he still throws fits sometimes. They give in sometimes. But they're trying. And that matters. Brandon apologized to me. He said, I felt like you were calling me a bad dad. That broke something in me. I said, I never thought that. I just thought you were making a mistake. He said, parents don't want to hear that word. I told him, siblings don't want to watch their nephews get sick. We both kind of laughed, but it was sad too. Emily asked me to help them sometimes, like taking Noah to the park or watching him so they can rest. I said yes without thinking. Last weekend, I took Noah to the park. I packed snacks like apple slices, crackers, and water. He complained at first. He asked where the cookies were. I said, not today, buddy. He pouted, but then he saw other kids playing and ran toward them. He didn't run long, but he ran longer than I'd ever seen him before. He fell once and cried, but he got back up. By the end, he was tired but smiling. On the drive home, he said, Auntie, I'm fast. I almost cried. I know this isn't over. I know habits like this don't change in a few weeks. I know there will be setbacks, but for the first time, I don't feel like I'm just watching something bad happen. My relationship with Brandon is still a little fragile. We're careful with each other now. But there's also honesty again. I still don't know if I handled things perfectly. I probably could have been softer. I probably could have chosen better words. But I also know that staying silent would have haunted me. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you comfort for a while. Sometimes it almost costs you people you love. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it opens the door for things to get better. Update. My brother and his wife might be hurting their kid, and I don't know if I should say something. It's been about 4 months since that last update, and I wanted to come back because a lot has changed in ways I honestly didn't expect. Noah is still a big kid, but he's different now. He moves more. He laughs more when he plays instead of getting frustrated right away. He still gets tired faster than some kids his age, but he doesn't just sit down and give up anymore. Brandon and Emily didn't magically become perfect parents overnight. They still mess up. They still give in sometimes. But the difference is that now they notice when they mess up and they actually try again instead of pretending nothing is wrong. They started following what the doctor suggested more seriously. No more soda at all. Juice is only sometimes and watered down. Most days it's water or milk. They stopped buying big bags of candy and chips. If it's not in the house, they can't give it to him when he cries. At first, Noah was angry, like really angry. He screamed. He threw toys. He cried over snacks more than I've ever seen a kid cry. Emily called me one night in tears and said, I feel like I'm torturing him. I told her, you're not. You're teaching him something hard. She said, I just hate hearing him cry. I said, I know. But he cried before too. You just covered it with sugar. That stuck with her. They started using other ways to calm him down. Hugs. Sitting with him. Reading. Going outside. Letting him stomp around and be mad for a minute without fixing it with food. It's not pretty, but it's real. About a month ago, they went back to the doctor for a follow-up. Noah didn't lose a ton of weight, but he didn't gain much either, which the doctor said was actually a good sign at his age. His breathing sounded better. His blood work looked okay. The doctor said they were on the right track. Brandon told me later, I didn't realize how scared I was until the doctor said things were improving. Emily said, I didn't realize how much guilt I was carrying until someone finally said we're doing better. Our relationship is different now too. We talk more honestly, not just about Noah, but about everything. Brandon admitted that he felt like a failure when Noah cried, like he was doing something wrong as a dad. Emily admitted that she grew up in a house where food was love, and she didn't know how to show comfort without it. I admitted that I came in too sharp at first. I told them I was scared and angry, and I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was attacking them. They said they understand that now. Noah still asks for candy sometimes. Sometimes they say yes. But now it's not every day. It's not the answer to every problem. He's learning that being bored doesn't mean you eat. Being sad doesn't always mean you get sugar. The best moment for me happened last week. We all went to the park together. Brandon brought a ball. Emily packed snacks that were mostly fruit, crackers, and sandwiches. Noah ran. He didn't run far, and he didn't run fast like the older kids, but he ran. He kicked the ball with his dad. He laughed so hard, he fell down. He got back up. At one point, he came over to me, sweaty and red in the face, and said, "Auntie, I can run longer now." I said, "Yeah, you can." He said, "I'm getting strong." I had to turn my face away for a second because I didn't want anyone to see me cry. Later that night, Brandon texted me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on us." Emily sent me a heart. I know this story didn't end with everything perfect. Noah will probably always be a kid who struggles with food more than some others. Brandon and Emily will probably always fight the urge to make things easy instead of right. But this is the first time I feel like we're not just reacting anymore. We're actually trying to change something. I still think about how close I came to just backing off completely. How close I came to choosing peace over honesty. I'm glad I didn't. It almost cost me my brother for a while, but it might have helped give my nephew a better future. Sometimes love looks like being quiet, but sometimes love looks like saying something that makes everyone uncomfortable. Stories number 9. My husband abandoned me by text 2 months after our wedding, and I don't know how to process the last 6 years. I never imagined I would be writing something like this, and honestly, even typing the words makes my chest feel tight. I am 25, and I got married just 2 months ago to the man I thought I would grow old with. His name is Brandon. We met when we were both 19 at a community college in Texas. Back then, we were both broke, working part-time jobs, and dreaming big. I thought we were building something together. Now, I am sitting alone in our apartment, trying to understand how 6 years of my life ended with a text message. Brandon always wanted to be a musician. Specifically, he wanted to be a solo artist. He wrote songs, played guitar, and talked endlessly about making it big. I believed in him. I really did. I thought passion mattered more than practicality when you're young. I supported him emotionally, financially, and in ways I didn't even realize until now. After 2 years together, I transferred to a university and finished my degree in business administration. Brandon dropped out to focus on music. At the time, it felt like a mutual decision, even though I was the only one compromising. I worked full-time while going to school. I paid most of the rent, groceries, utilities, car insurance, and even helped pay for his recording equipment. He would say things like, "This is temporary, and one day I'll make it up to you." I believed him every time. For 6 years, our relationship revolved around his career, his gigs, his moods, his creativity. If he was inspired, things were good. If he was discouraged, everyone walked on eggshells. When I got my first real job after graduation, I was so proud of myself. I remember telling him how excited I was, and he smiled, but then immediately started talking about how this would give him more freedom to focus on music. That should have been a red flag, but I ignored it. We got engaged last year. Brandon proposed in a very low-effort way, but I told myself that love mattered more than gestures. We planned a small wedding because money was tight, mostly because I had been covering so much for so long. I paid for most of the wedding too. Dress, venue, food rings. My parents helped where they could. His parents barely showed interest. Still, I was happy. I truly believed we were finally starting our life. 2 months into the marriage, Brandon started acting distant. He spent more time out late. He stopped talking about future plans. I asked him directly if something was wrong, and he said he was just stressed about music and feeling stuck. I reassured him like I always had. I told him we were a team. Then, 3 nights ago, I got a text while I was still at work. It was from Brandon. He said he needed space and that he couldn't do this anymore. He said he felt like he lost himself and needed to find out who he was without me. He said he was staying with a friend named Kyle and not to contact him for a while. That was it. No conversation, no explanation, no face-to-face goodbye. Just a message ending a 6-year relationship and a 2-month marriage. I went home and his clothes were gone. His guitar was gone. His laptop was gone. He had planned this. I sat on the floor and cried until I felt numb. The next morning I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted asking if we could talk. He replied hours later saying he didn't want to argue and that this was best for both of us. I feel stupid. I feel used. I feel like I invested my youth, my money, my energy into someone who saw me as a safety net, not a partner. Looking back, I realize how often my needs came second. How often my achievements were minimized. How everything was always about his dream. Now I'm left dealing with the legal side of this. Our lease is in both our names. The car is in my name, but he drives it. The bank account we opened together is mostly my money. I spoke briefly with a coworker named Melissa who told me I should talk to a lawyer immediately. Part of me feels dramatic even thinking about divorce so soon, but another part of me knows I can't come back from this kind of abandonment. I keep replaying the text in my head. How easy it was for him to walk away once he got what he needed. I supported him for 6 years, and when it was time to actually show up as a husband, he disappeared. I feel embarrassed telling friends and family. I haven't even told my parents yet. I don't know how to say my husband left me by text like a bad breakup, not a marriage. I'm asking myself if divorcing him is the right move or if I'm acting out of hurt. But every time I imagine forgiving this, I feel sick. I don't think I could ever trust him again. Marriage was supposed to mean something. Commitment was supposed to mean you don't run at the first sign of discomfort. I don't know what the future looks like now. I know I need to protect myself legally and emotionally. I know I deserve better than this. I just never thought better would start with being alone. If anyone has been through something like this or has advice on what steps I should take next, I would appreciate it. Right now I feel lost, betrayed, and exhausted, and I'm trying to figure out if ending this marriage is me giving up or finally choosing myself. Update. My husband abandoned me by text 2 months after our wedding, and I don't know how to process the last 6 years. It's been a little over 3 weeks since I wrote my original post, and I honestly didn't expect so much to happen in such a short amount of time. I also didn't expect how much writing everything out would help me see things more clearly. I'm still not okay, but I'm more grounded than I was that first night on the apartment floor. The day after I posted, I finally told my parents. That was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I drove to their house and sat at the kitchen table where I used to do homework as a kid, and I just broke down. My mom cried immediately. My dad was quiet in that way that means he's trying not to say something he can't take back. They were shocked, but not as shocked as I thought they would be. My mom admitted she had worried for a long time that I was carrying too much of the relationship alone. Hearing that hurt, but also validated something I had been denying. My dad helped me find a family law attorney through a friend. I met with her 2 days later. Her name is Sharon, and she was very calm, very direct, and exactly what I needed. She told me that in our state, abandonment even this early in a marriage is taken seriously. She advised me to document everything, including the text message, the dates he left, and any financial contributions I made. She also told me to move my money immediately. That part terrified me, but I did it. I opened a new account in my own name and transferred my paycheck and savings. I left enough in the joint account to cover basic bills so he couldn't accuse me of draining it. Sharon said that was smart. She also told me not to let him use the car anymore since it's legally mine. I texted Brandon telling him he needed to return it by the end of the week. He responded almost immediately, which was interesting considering how silent he had been before. He said I was being extreme and that he needed the car to get to work. I asked him when he got a job, because for years I was told music was his full-time focus. He didn't respond to that. He dropped the car off 2 days later without seeing me. He left the keys with the neighbor. A few days after that, I found out through social media that he wasn't just staying with a friend. He had been posting photos at open mic nights with a woman named Tara, tagging him and calling him inspiring. I won't lie, that crushed me. Even if nothing physical happened, the emotional betrayal was obvious. I showed Sharon the screenshots, and she told me to save everything. Brandon finally agreed to meet in person to talk. We met at a coffee shop. He looked different. Lighter, almost like someone who had dropped a responsibility instead of a relationship. He said he felt suffocated in the marriage, and that he realized too late he wasn't ready. I asked him why he still married me then. He said he thought it would fix things. That sentence broke something in me permanently. I told him I was filing for divorce. He looked shocked, like he thought I would wait around until he figured himself out. He asked if we could separate instead and see how things go. I told him no. I said I deserved a partner, not a project. I also told him I felt used. He didn't deny it. He just said he never meant to hurt me. That was the moment I stopped hoping for closure. Legally, things are moving faster than I expected. Because the marriage was short, there aren't many shared assets, but Sharon is pushing for reimbursement for some of the money I put into his equipment since it came from joint funds after the marriage. I don't know if that will go anywhere, but it feels good to at least try. He hasn't contested the divorce yet, but his tone has shifted. He's gone from distant to irritated now that there are real consequences. Emotionally, I'm all over the place. Some days I wake up angry and feel like I wasted 6 years. Other days I feel weirdly relieved. I don't have to carry anyone else's dream anymore. I don't have to make myself smaller to support someone else's ego. I've started sleeping better. I've started making plans that don't involve waiting for someone else to be ready. Friends have shown up in ways I didn't expect. A coworker named Danielle brought me groceries. My friend Hannah comes over and watches terrible reality shows with me just so I'm not alone. These small things remind me that I'm not as isolated as I felt in that marriage. I still struggle with the shame of it ending so fast. I worry about what people will think. But more than that, I worry about what would have happened if I stayed. If he could walk away this easily now, what would 10 years have looked like? Kids, mortgages, emergencies. I don't think I could ever trust him to stay. I don't know what the final outcome will be legally, but emotionally, I know I'm done. Divorce no longer feels like a failure. It feels like a boundary. I gave 6 years of loyalty, support, and love. Walking away now isn't giving up. It's finally choosing myself. Update. My husband abandoned me by text 2 months after our wedding, and I don't know how to process the last 6 years. It's been a few months now, and I wanted to write this once I felt like I could look back without my chest tightening every time I thought about his name. A lot has settled, and a lot has changed, and while this isn't a fairy tale ending, it finally feels like a real one. The divorce is finalized. It happened faster than I ever thought it would. Because the marriage was so short and there were no children, the process was mostly paperwork and waiting. Brandon didn't fight it. In fact, he barely participated. He missed one deadline, and his lawyer had to request an extension. That felt oddly familiar. I wasn't surprised, and I think that was the moment I fully accepted who he is and who he is not. Financially, things ended up better than I expected. I didn't get back everything I put into him over the years, but the court did order him to reimburse a portion of the money spent on equipment purchased after the marriage. It wasn't life-changing, but it felt like acknowledgement. More importantly, my finances are finally just mine. No more wondering if I can afford something because someone else might need it more. That freedom is worth more than any check. We had to do one final mediation session over the lease. He wanted out immediately. I wanted him to take responsibility for his share. The mediator, a calm older man named Robert, looked at him and asked if he understood that marriage included obligations even when feelings change. Brandon shrugged. That told me everything. In the end, he agreed to pay 2 months of rent, and then I took over the lease myself. I kept the apartment. It's quiet now, but it's peaceful. I haven't spoken to Brandon since the papers were signed. I blocked him everywhere, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I don't need updates on his music journey or his self-discovery. I don't need apologies that come too late. Closure came when I stopped expecting him to be someone different. I did hear through mutual acquaintances that things didn't work out with the woman from the open mic nights. Apparently, he moved back in with his parents for a while. That information didn't make me feel victorious. It just made me sad in a distant way, like hearing about someone you used to know in another life. The biggest change has been internal. I started therapy shortly after everything happened. My therapist, Emily, helped me see how deeply I tied my worth to being needed, how supporting him became my identity. Letting go of that has been uncomfortable, but freeing. I'm learning how to want things for myself without guilt. I've started saying yes to opportunities I used to talk myself out of. I applied for a promotion and got it. I booked a solo trip to Colorado, something I always wanted to do but never did because it didn't fit into his plans. I come home to a space that feels like mine. Every piece of furniture, every decision, every quiet night belongs to me. I don't feel broken anymore. I feel changed. Stronger, in some ways sadder in others, but more honest with myself than I've ever been. If there's one thing I know now, it's that love without mutual effort isn't love. It's labor. I used to be embarrassed that my marriage ended after 2 months. Now I'm grateful it didn't take 10 years. I didn't fail at marriage. I survived one that was never truly shared. If anyone reading this is in a relationship where they're carrying everything and calling it love, please hear this. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. Stories number 10. My parents barely reacted when my older brother died, and I don't know how to forgive that. I have been sitting with this for a long time, and I still don't know how to put it into words without feeling like I'm betraying my family. My older brother died last year, and what hurts almost as much as losing him is how little our parents seem to care. I keep going back and forth between thinking I'm being unfair and thinking I will never see them the same way again. My brother's name was Daniel. He was 6 years older than me, and for most of my life, he was my safe place. We grew up in a small town in Ohio, and our parents, Linda and Mark, were strict in that quiet, emotionally distant way. They provided food and a roof and rides to school, but affection was rare. Praise was even rarer. Daniel noticed it early, and I think he took it harder than I did. When we were kids, Daniel did everything right. He got good grades, he played sports, he stayed out of trouble. Nothing ever seemed good enough for our parents. If he got an A, they asked why it wasn't an A+. If he won a game, they pointed out what he did wrong. I was younger and quieter, so I flew under the radar. Daniel took the pressure head on, and I watched it wear him down year by year. As teenagers, the gap between Daniel and our parents grew wider. He wanted to go out of state for college. Our parents said it was a waste of money and told him to pick something practical nearby. He wanted to study music production. They laughed and said that wasn't a real career. Daniel ended up leaving anyway with student loans and a lot of resentment. Once he moved away, the relationship barely existed. Phone calls were short and awkward. Visits were tense. Our parents complained that Daniel had changed and become ungrateful. Daniel told me privately that he felt like he had never been loved for who he actually was. I tried to stay neutral, but I understood him more than I wanted to admit. After college, Daniel moved to California and worked freelance jobs. He struggled financially at times, but he sounded happier. He made friends. He talked about projects he was excited about. He still called me every week. Sometimes he would vent about our parents. Sometimes he would joke and ask how boring Ohio was treating me. No matter what, he showed up for me. Last year I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a police officer in Los Angeles. He asked if I was related to Daniel and then told me my brother had died. I don't want to go into details because that part still feels unreal. I remember sitting on my bed, staring at the wall, and thinking the officer had the wrong person. Daniel was only 32. I called my parents immediately. My mom answered, and I told her Daniel was gone. There was a pause, and then she said, "What do you mean gone?" I explained again and waited for something. Crying. Shock. Anything. She went quiet for a moment and then said, "Oh, that was it. Just oh." She told me she would tell my dad when he got home from work. She asked how I found out. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't say she was sorry. The call ended after less than 2 minutes. I sat there shaking and called my best friend because I couldn't breathe. The next day, my dad called me. He said he was sorry for my loss in a tone that sounded like a coworker offering condolences after a distant relative dies. He asked if there would be a funeral and whether they needed to fly out. When I said yes, he said they would see what they could do depending on work schedules. That sentence still echoes in my head. They did end up flying out, but it felt like an obligation rather than grief. At the funeral, my mom hugged me stiffly. My dad shook hands with people and thanked them for coming. They didn't cry. They didn't talk about Daniel. They left early because they were tired. Afterward, I stayed with them at their hotel for a night, and that was when it really hit me. My mom complained about the cost of the flight. My dad complained about the traffic. When I tried to talk about Daniel, they changed the subject. At one point, I asked my mom if she was okay, and she said, "Well, he made his choices." I snapped. I asked what that was supposed to mean. She said Daniel chose a difficult life, and that stress probably contributed to what happened. She said parents aren't supposed to outlive their children, but that life isn't fair. Her voice was flat, almost annoyed. I asked my dad how he felt. He shrugged and said, "It's sad, but we weren't close anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was their son, the kid they raised, the boy who used to practice guitar in his bedroom for hours, the brother who protected me from bullies and taught me how to drive. And they were acting like a distant cousin had passed away. After they went home, I fell apart. I took time off work and barely functioned. Grief came in waves, and so did anger. I was angry at the universe for taking Daniel. I was angry at my parents for never meeting him halfway. I was angry at myself for not pushing harder for reconciliation while there was still time. Over the next few months, I noticed something else. My parents rarely mentioned Daniel at all. They didn't call to check on me. They didn't ask how I was coping. When I brought him up, my mom would say things like, "Let's not dwell on that," or "He wouldn't want us to be sad." It felt like they wanted to erase him. The breaking point came around the holidays. We were having dinner, and my mom started talking about redecorating Daniel's old room, because it was just storage now. I asked if we could wait. She looked confused and asked why. I said because he just died, and it feels too soon. She sighed and said, "You're holding on to this too tightly." I excused myself and cried in the bathroom like I was a kid again. That was the moment I realized my grief and theirs were not just different, but incompatible. I started pulling away after that. I stopped calling as often. I stopped sharing details about my life. When my parents noticed and asked what was wrong, I told them I was still grieving and felt unsupported. My dad said everyone grieves differently and that I shouldn't judge them. My mom said I was being dramatic and making a tragedy harder than it needed to be. I don't know how to explain that it's not about them crying or performing sadness. It's about the absence of care, the lack of curiosity about who Daniel was and what he meant to the people who loved him. It's about how easily they moved on while I feel like I lost a limb. Sometimes I wonder if they really loved him at all, or if they only loved the version of him they wanted him to be. And sometimes I wonder if that's how they see me too. I feel guilty for feeling this way. They are my parents. They did raise us. They didn't abuse us. But something feels fundamentally broken now. I don't trust them with my emotions. I don't feel safe sharing my grief. I feel like an orphan even though they are still alive. I miss my brother every day. I miss his laugh. I miss his advice. I miss knowing there was someone in the world who understood our family dynamic without explanation. Losing him feels like losing the one witness to my childhood. I don't know if I'm wrong for being hurt or if I'm expecting something unreasonable. All I know is that when Daniel died, something else died with him. The image I had of my parents as people who would show up emotionally when it mattered. And I don't know how to come back from that. Update: my parents barely reacted when my older brother died, and I don't know how to forgive that. It has been several months since I first wrote, and I needed time before coming back, because everything that followed forced me to confront things I had avoided my entire life. Some of it was painful. Some of it was clarifying in a way I didn't expect. After the holidays, the distance between me and my parents became very real. I stopped initiating contact completely. If they called, I answered, but I kept things surface level. Work was fine. I was fine. Life was busy. That was it. They didn't push much, which honestly hurt more. A part of me hoped they would notice something was wrong and ask. They never really did. What changed things was when Daniel's former roommate, Ethan, reached out to me. He found my number through Daniel's phone and said he had been meaning to contact me. We met for coffee and talked for hours. Ethan told me stories about Daniel I had never heard, how generous he was, how he helped friends financially even when he didn't have much, how he mentored younger musicians and stayed up late encouraging people who were struggling. Then Ethan said something that knocked the wind out of me. He told me Daniel used to talk about our parents a lot, not with anger, but with sadness. He said Daniel always hoped that one day they would show some sign that they were proud of him. Ethan told me Daniel once said that if our parents ever told him they loved him without conditions, he would finally feel at peace. Hearing that broke me in a way I didn't know was possible. A few weeks after that, my mom called and asked if I was coming home for my dad's birthday. I said I didn't know. She pressed, asking why I was being distant. For the first time, I didn't dodge it. I told her the truth. I told her how much their reaction to Daniel's death hurt me. I told her it felt like they lost a stranger, not a son. There was a long silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said she didn't know how to grieve Daniel because she had already grieved him years ago when he left and stopped living the life she imagined for him. She said she felt like she lost him a long time ago. That sentence made everything painfully clear. To her, Daniel wasn't gone last year. He was gone the moment he stopped fitting into her expectations. I asked her if she ever told Daniel she loved him just as he was. She said of course she loved him, but then added that love doesn't mean approving of every choice. I told her that wasn't the question. She didn't answer. After that call, I cried harder than I had since the funeral. But it wasn't just grief. It was validation. As awful as it sounds, I finally understood that Daniel wasn't imagining things. He wasn't overly sensitive. He wasn't difficult. He was starved for emotional acceptance. A month later, my dad called. He said my mom told him about our conversation. He admitted that he didn't know how to deal with emotions and never had. He said he thought staying calm and practical was the responsible thing to do. I asked him if he knew how much that came across as indifference. He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly that maybe he failed both of us in that way. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to accountability I had ever heard from him. I decided to do something that was just for me. I started therapy, not because my parents suggested it, because I realized I had been minimizing my feelings my whole life to survive in that household. My therapist helped me see how much I learned to earn approval through being easy and quiet. Daniel didn't play that role. He pushed back. And he paid the price emotionally. I wrote my parents a letter. I didn't send it right away. I rewrote it multiple times. In the end, I told them I loved them, but that I needed space. I told them I was still grieving Daniel, and that their lack of emotional presence made that harder. I told them I wasn't asking them to grieve the way I do, but I needed them to acknowledge the depth of the loss. They didn't respond for weeks. When they finally did, it was short. My mom said she was sorry I felt hurt. My dad said he hoped time would help. That was it. And strangely, that was enough for me to let go of hoping for more. I stopped waiting for them to become different people. I stopped hoping they would suddenly understand Daniel the way I did. I accepted that their limitations are real and not something I can fix. That acceptance didn't make everything better, but it made it quieter inside my head. I still miss my brother every single day. I talk to him out loud sometimes when I'm alone. I keep his guitar pick in my wallet. I visit his favorite places when I can. I make space for the grief instead of fighting it. My relationship with my parents exists now, but it is smaller, more distant, more guarded, and I no longer feel guilty about that. Losing Daniel taught me that life is too short to beg for emotional crumbs from people who don't know how to give more. I don't think I'll ever fully forgive how they handled his death, but I also don't carry the same burning anger anymore. What I feel now is sadness. Sadness for Daniel. Sadness for the parents he never really had. And sadness for the version of family I once believed in. Update: my parents barely reacted when my older brother died, and I don't know how to forgive that. I didn't think I would need to write again, but something shifted recently, and it felt wrong to leave this unfinished. Not because everything suddenly worked out, but because I finally understand where I stand and why. After my last update, I kept my distance from my parents. Not in a dramatic way. I just stopped trying. No more emotional explanations. No more hoping they would suddenly ask the right questions. If they called, I answered. If they didn't, I let it be. That space gave me room to notice how much energy I used to spend managing their comfort instead of my own grief. A few months ago, my mom called out of the blue and asked if I wanted some of Daniel's things. She said she was cleaning out old boxes and didn't know what to do with them. She listed them like items on a checklist: his high school yearbooks, some photos, a few notebooks, no emotion attached, just logistics. I said yes and drove over the next weekend. Being back in that house felt strange, smaller than I remembered, quieter. My dad watched TV while my mom handed me a cardboard box. That was it. No sitting down, no stories, no shared memories. When I opened the box later at home, I found things I wasn't prepared for. Old letters Daniel had written but never sent. Lyrics scribbled on scrap paper. A notebook where he wrote about feeling invisible in his own family. One line stood out, and I had to stop reading for a while because I couldn't breathe. He wrote that he hoped one day I would never doubt that I was loved, even if he did. That line changed something in me. I realized Daniel had spent his whole life protecting me in ways I never fully saw. He absorbed the emotional coldness so I didn't have to. He questioned things so I could stay safe. And even in his own pain, he worried more about me than himself. A week after that, I confronted my parents one last time. Not to fix anything, not to get an apology, just to be honest. I told them I found Daniel's writings. I told them he felt unseen and unloved. I told them that their reaction to his death confirmed every fear he ever had. My mom cried then. Really cried. But it didn't feel like relief. It felt like regret mixed with defensiveness. She said she didn't know he felt that way. I told her he tried to show them. My dad stayed quiet the entire time. When I asked him if he wanted to say anything, he said he wished he had done some things differently. That was all. And strangely, that conversation didn't devastate me like I expected. It just confirmed what I already knew. They are limited. Not evil, not cruel, just emotionally unavailable in ways that caused real damage. I told them I loved them, but that our relationship would never be what it was before. I said I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't minimize Daniel's pain to protect their self-image. I said I needed distance and that it wasn't punishment. It was survival. They didn't argue. They didn't fight it. And that acceptance told me everything. Now, months later, my life feels quieter, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. I still miss Daniel every day. That will never go away. But I no longer carry the extra weight of trying to make sense of my parents' indifference. I stopped asking why they are the way they are. I stopped hoping they would become different people. I talk about Daniel openly now. With friends, with coworkers, with people who actually listen. I celebrate his life instead of shrinking his memory to keep others comfortable. I play his favorite music. I keep his words close. I also stopped feeling guilty for being hurt. Hurt is the natural response when love is absent where it should have been. Grief doesn't have a rule book, and neither does estrangement. If there is one thing I know for sure now, it's this. Being someone's parent doesn't automatically make you safe. And being hurt by your parents doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. Daniel deserved better. I deserved better. And even though I can't change the past, I can choose what I carry forward. I carry my brother with me, his kindness, his protectiveness, his truth. Stories number 11. My ex ignored every warning about his dog, and now I'm being blamed for what happened next. I never thought I would be the person people in my life point at and call heartless. I've always been the reliable one, the planner, the person who takes responsibility even when it's uncomfortable. That's exactly why I ended up in this situation and why it hurts so much that no one seems willing to see the full picture. My ex and I were together for 3 years. When we met, he already had a dog named Ranger. Ranger was a big mixed breed, high energy, stubborn, and honestly kind of neglected even back then. My ex loved the idea of having a dog more than the reality of caring for one. Walks were inconsistent. Training was non-existent. Vet visits only happened when something was visibly wrong. When we moved in together, Ranger came with him. I didn't mind at first. I like dogs. I grew up with them. But it became obvious very quickly that Ranger's care was going to fall on me if it was going to happen at all. I was the one feeding him on schedule. I was the one taking him out in the morning and late at night. I was the one cleaning up accidents and buying food when my ex forgot or claimed he was short on money. We fought about it constantly. My ex would promise to do better, then nothing would change. Ranger wasn't a bad dog, but he had issues. He was anxious. He chewed things up. He barked nonstop when left alone. He jumped on people. None of that is surprising when a dog doesn't get proper structure or attention. Things finally fell apart between me and my ex for reasons beyond the dog, but Ranger was definitely part of the stress. When we broke up, my ex moved out. He asked if I could keep Ranger for a little while until he found a place that allowed dogs. I hesitated, but agreed because I didn't want Ranger to end up dumped somewhere unsafe. That little while turned into months. At first, my ex checked in occasionally. Then the messages became less frequent. He stopped sending money for food. He stopped asking how Ranger was doing. Meanwhile, I was paying for everything. Food, flea meds, toys, replacing things Ranger destroyed. I also got a notice from my landlord after Ranger barked excessively while I was at work. The notice was clear. One more complaint, and I would be fined or asked to remove the dog. I told my ex immediately. I explained the situation in detail. I told him I needed him to either take Ranger back or make other arrangements. He said he was working on it and asked for more time. I gave it to him. Then Ranger got sick. It wasn't an emergency at first, but he was lethargic and not eating. I took him to the vet because waiting wasn't an option. The bill wasn't small. I paid it. I told my ex. He thanked me and said he would pay me back when he could. He never did. That was when I set a deadline. I told him clearly, in writing, that he had 30 days to take responsibility for Ranger. That meant either picking him up, arranging a foster or family member, or formally surrendering him to a rescue himself. I told him I could not keep doing this and that my housing was at risk. I even offered to help find rescues and sent him links and phone numbers. He didn't take it seriously. He said I was overreacting. He said Ranger was fine. He said shelters were cruel and that I wouldn't actually do anything. Every time I reminded him of the deadline, he brushed it off or changed the subject. When there were 10 days left, I told him again. When there were 5 days left, I told him again. The deadline came and went with no plan, no pickup date, no solution. A week after the deadline, I got another complaint from my landlord. This one was firmer. I had a choice: remove the dog or risk losing my apartment. I reached out to my ex one last time. I told him exactly what was happening and that I needed an answer immediately. He didn't respond for 2 days. When he finally did, it was a single message saying he was busy and would deal with it later. That was the moment something in me snapped. I contacted a local animal control office and a no-kill shelter. I explained the situation honestly. I explained that the dog's owner had abandoned him with me, that I had documentation, and that I could not keep him legally or financially. They told me my options. None of them were pleasant, but pretending nothing was wrong wasn't an option anymore. I followed through. I surrendered Ranger to a shelter that works with rescues and fosters. I made sure he had his medical records. I paid the surrender fee. I stayed with him as long as I was allowed. He didn't understand what was happening, and that part will probably haunt me forever. I cried the entire drive home. I told my ex afterward. He exploded. He accused me of betrayal. He accused me of being cruel and heartless. He said I had no right. He told mutual friends that I gave his dog away out of spite. He left out every message, every warning, every bill, every deadline. Suddenly, I was the villain who got rid of his dog. People started reaching out to me. Some asked what happened. Others didn't ask at all and just judged. A few said I should have just kept Ranger longer. A few said I should have forced my ex to step up. No one offered to take the dog. No one offered to help pay for anything. They just had opinions. The worst part is that I miss Ranger. Even with all the stress, I loved him. I still worry about whether he's okay, whether he's confused, whether he thinks I abandoned him. I did everything I could to avoid that outcome and still ended up here. Legally, I know I did what I had to do. I documented everything. I followed the process. Emotionally, I feel like I'm carrying all the weight alone while my ex gets to be angry without consequences. I didn't wake up one day and decide to punish him by surrendering his dog. I was backed into a corner by his refusal to act and by real consequences that would have affected my housing and finances. I gave him chance after chance because I didn't want this ending. Now I'm sitting with the aftermath, questioning myself even though I know the facts. I'm being treated like I crossed some unforgivable line for refusing to keep sacrificing myself for someone who stopped caring the moment it became inconvenient. I don't know if time will change how people see this or if I'll always be the bad guy in their version of the story. All I know is that I didn't abandon that dog. His owner did. I just refused to let that abandonment destroy my life too. Update. My ex ignored every warning about his dog, and now I'm being blamed for what happened next. I didn't expect things to get louder after that, but they did. For a while, I tried to stay quiet and let the situation cool off. That turned out to be impossible. My ex didn't calm down. He escalated. A few days after I told him what I had done, he started posting vague, but obviously targeted things online about betrayal and people who pretend to care about animals. Mutual friends knew exactly who he meant. I started getting messages that weren't outright hostile, but were clearly judgmental. People asking how I could live with myself. People telling me I should have found another way. Not one of them had reached out during the months I was caring for Ranger. Not one of them had offered to take him. Then, my ex showed up at my apartment unannounced. He was furious. He accused me of stealing his dog. He said I had no legal right to surrender Ranger because I wasn't the owner. I told him I had already spoken to animal control in the shelter and that I had documentation showing abandonment. He didn't want to hear it. He threatened to sue me. He threatened to call the police. I told him to leave or I would call them myself. That interaction shook me more than I expected. I double-checked everything I had done. I went through my messages again. I saved screenshots. I contacted the shelter to let them know my ex might try to cause problems. They told me they were already aware and that he had, in fact, contacted them. Apparently, when he called the shelter, he tried to demand Ranger back immediately. He told them I had acted maliciously and without his consent. They asked him basic questions: where he had been living, why the dog had been with me for months, why he hadn't responded to written deadlines, why he hadn't paid for food or medical care. He couldn't answer any of it in a way that helped his case. They told him that if he wanted to reclaim Ranger, he would need to go through their formal process and prove he was capable of caring for him. That included stable housing, proof of income, and a plan for training and vet care. He did not like that answer. Instead of doing the work, he doubled down on blaming me. He told friends that the shelter was corrupt and that I had manipulated them. Some people stopped talking to me entirely. Others quietly reached out and asked for the full story. When I showed them messages and timelines, a few apologized. A few stayed silent. I learned very quickly who wanted the truth and who just wanted a villain. About 2 weeks later, I got an email from the shelter. Ranger had been placed with a foster family that specializes in high-energy dogs. They had already started basic training. He was responding well. They said he was anxious at first, but improving. They told me they couldn't share updates long-term, but wanted me to know that he was safe. I cried harder reading that email than I did the day I surrendered him. Something shifted in me after that. The constant guilt eased just enough for me to breathe again. I realized that my ex's anger wasn't actually about Ranger. It was about control and embarrassment. Being forced to face his neglect made him lash out at the easiest target, which was me. The threats never turned into anything real. No police. No lawsuit. Just noise. Eventually, even the noise faded when people stopped engaging with him. My landlord situation stabilized once Ranger was gone. No more complaints. No more warnings. That alone confirmed how unsustainable things had been. I still miss Ranger. I probably always will. I still think about whether I could have done something differently, whether there was some magical solution that wouldn't have hurt anyone. But the more distance I get, the clearer it becomes that there wasn't. I didn't surrender him out of anger. I didn't do it impulsively. I did it after months of warnings, documentation, and broken promises. I did it because the person who should have stepped up refused to. What hurts now isn't the decision itself. It's the realization that caring too much kept me trapped longer than I should have been. Loving an animal doesn't mean accepting responsibility forever when the actual owner walks away. I don't know if my ex will ever take accountability or if he'll always tell the story where I'm the monster. I can't control that. What I can control is knowing that Ranger ended up in a place where his needs are being met, which is more than his owner was willing to do. Final update. My ex ignored every warning about his dog, and now I'm being blamed for what happened next. I waited a while before writing this because I wanted to be sure nothing else was going to explode out of nowhere. Things have finally gone quiet enough that I can say this is truly the end. After that email from the shelter, I stopped engaging with my ex completely. I didn't respond to messages, didn't defend myself online, didn't try to correct his version of events anymore. It was exhausting carrying the need to be understood by people who had already decided how they felt. Letting go of that was harder than I expected, but necessary. A month or so later, I heard through a mutual friend that my ex had tried again to get Ranger back. This time he actually went to the shelter in person. From what I was told, it did not go well. He didn't have stable housing. He didn't have proof of consistent income. He didn't have any kind of training plan or vet records beyond what I had provided. He apparently got angry when they asked him questions and stormed out. Not long after that, the shelter contacted me one last time. They told me Ranger had been officially adopted. He went to the foster family that had been working with him. They decided to keep him. They had the space, the time, and the experience to handle a dog like him. They had a yard. They had another dog that he bonded with. They were already continuing his training. The shelter said he had settled in well and that his anxiety had decreased significantly. I sat on my couch and cried again, but this time it felt different. Not the sharp guilt or panic I had been carrying for months, but something closer to relief. Ranger was safe. He wasn't bouncing between unstable situations. He wasn't waiting for someone who kept choosing everything else over him. When word got back to my ex that Ranger had been adopted, the anger flared up briefly and then fizzled. There was nothing left for him to threaten or demand. The story lost its power once there was no reversal possible. Some of the people who had judged me early on reached out quietly. A few apologized outright. Others didn't apologize, but changed their tone, which was still something. A couple admitted they hadn't realized how long Ranger had been with me or how many chances my ex had been given. I didn't need them to validate me anymore, but it helped to know I wasn't completely alone in reality. The biggest change has been internal. For the first time since the breakup, I feel like I can actually move forward. I rearranged my apartment. I donated the dog things I no longer needed. I stopped bracing myself every time my phone buzzed. I still think about Ranger. I always will. There are moments when I see a dog that looks like him or hear a bark that sounds familiar and my chest tightens for a second. But now that feeling is followed by the knowledge that he landed somewhere better than where he was before. That matters. As for my ex, I see him more clearly now. This wasn't about the dog as much as it was about avoiding responsibility and redirecting blame. I carried that responsibility for far too long because I thought caring meant enduring whatever came with it. I know better now. If I've learned anything from all of this, it's that stepping in to help does not obligate you to sacrifice your life indefinitely when the person who should be accountable refuses to be. Loving an animal doesn't mean you have to destroy your own stability to prove it.